Hello, guys. So today I'm reading a book named Hindus in Hindu Rashtra, and the book is written by none other than Anand Ranganathan. I've been following uh, him from a very long time now, and most of my uh, the daily philosophies of life, I would definitely say, is heavily influenced from him, and not necessarily everything, but yeah, most some points I think some important respect with respect to free speech and economic theories. I think it was heavily, not heavily, but yeah, it is actually the trigger point is him. And then I started doing my own research, and yeah, it started making more sense. And with respect to other, backing of scientific also, I've started doing the others as well. So I would say the trigger point of my, the curiosity with respect to the other than my normal subject is heavily influenced, from Mr. Anand Ranganathan. And to give you a little introduction of him, he is a political commentator, not commentator as such. He's a very active in media, and he is a scientist and an author. And he has written three books, all novels: The Land of the Wilted Rose, The For Love and Honor, and The Rat Eaters, and more. The new book right now, it's Hindu for Hindu in Hindu Rashtra, and he's also a professor at Jawaharlal Nehru University. And now I'm gonna talk about. He's a prominent Indian scientist, author, and public intellectual. He's a professor at OKS. And to give you a little brief introductions about the book Hindu in Hindu Rashtra. To those who claim we are now living in a totalitarian, fascist Hindu Rashtra, one must ask, what kind of a Hindu Rashtra is this, where a billion strong Hindu have been through our parliament? So it basically talks about the how Hindu has become Hindu in India has become the eighth class citizen, and he pretty much argues about it. And I'll try to read it entire in one go because this book is not very long in length. And yeah, so the name of the book, the full name is Hindu in Hindu Rashtra, eighth class citizen and victim of a state sanctioned apartheid. So now, whenever I try to read a book, I just try to first understand the uh, what is the exact definitions of all of those things. So Hindu is a religion, and Hindu in Hindu Rashtra. Hindu Rashtra means, okay, Hindu Rashtra. Okay, I'll just try to Google it. I know, but I just want to confirm it, just to double check it to get the exact definition. So Hindu Rashtra literally means Hindu nation. So basically, his book name is Hindu in Hindu Nations, Hindu Rashtra in a political ideology. Okay, so now we'll talk about this one, eighth class citizen, right? So eighth class citizen, eighth class citizen, eighth class citizen. And an eighth class citizen is a rhetorical term used to describe a person or demographic that suffers. I mean, most of the time people use second class citizen, right? When in your own country, you're not, your caste, your religion, your society is not treated well, then it's called, you're being treated as a second class in your own citizen, second class, you're being treated as a second class citizen in your country. An eighth class citizen is a rhetorical term used to describe a person or demographic that suffers from extreme systematic marginalizations and institutional discrimination, reducing them to the very bottom of society's ladder. The phrase builds upon the idiom second class citizens, which refers to someone who is denied the same right, privileges, or protection as the dominant groups. By using the eighth class citizen, the term hyperbolically emphasizes a profound level of neglect, oppressions, or unequal treatment with the state. Okay, so it's a political rhetoric. The phrase is often used to criticize government for favoring specific communities while leaving others with virtually no political. Now the interesting thing is that the current government, BJP, it is mostly considered as a Hindu nationalist. That means this particular party favors the Hindu religion, that is the majority religions of India. But he's saying that they are being treated as eighth class citizens. But why? Why would anyone, the current government who is in favor of the Hindutva do that? Is it some sort of a political political narrative or any of those things. Let's find it out, right? Okay. I've listened to, I think, more than 20, 30, 40 hours videos of him explaining about all of the this entire thing in books, and not just that, his ideology as well. And and what I like about him is that he is a fact guy. He always gives a fact, and let's find it out now, right? Forwards. Okay. So forward it's given by Sai J, Jesai Deepak. Even this guy is one of my favorite um, person to follow with respect to intellectual conversation, and he's a Supreme Court lawyer, is an advocate, and he's a litigator, and he's very very active in um social media also. And the content is the forward prologue. Okay, state control of Hindu temples. Okay, so I'll just give you basic descriptions of what I think. Okay, to start itself. So, state control of Hindu temples. So the problem with India is that, I wouldn't say, yeah, it's a secular country, and the problem is that every religion, right? Not all the people in the country have the same rules and regulation. So most of the time, the Hindu and Buddhist, Sikh, and Jainism, they have the one rule, and then there is another rule for Islamic religion people, because I mean, if you are living in a country democracy, then obviously you have to, the first priority should be the constitutions. But they have an I wouldn't say advantage also, but they have an exception with respect to, they follow a different law, especially with respect to family, family and the culture and traditions, right? I'll give you an example, right? That all the religions except Islam in India can only marry once at a time. But the Muslim people, the Muslim men especially, they can have up to four wives, and it's legal under uh, under the law, and they can give a divorce to their wife by just saying three times talak, 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 and it's a divorce. So most of the women in Islam are they don't enjoy the same rights as many others. They have restriction with respect to their clothes. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, okay? I'm just, spitting out the facts. This is how it is, right? Doesn't matter if it's good or not. I'm not saying any of those things, right? I'm just talking about what is the reality. They don't have the right because they have to wear, they have to cover. And some extreme Islam, people, conservative family, they cover the entire body except eye, their eyes, both eyes, except the eyes. They have to cover the entire body. And in swimming pool also, they don't swim. I've not seen them swim. They just stay near the beach, and they cannot. I mean, they cannot, in a sense. Even if they want to swim, they have to swim with the entire cloth. Now you have to make a judgment about, is it right, is it wrong? Because as per the Sharia law, it says that the woman has to wear a reasonable cloth, or they have to cover reasonable, a modesty, right? Now the definition of modesty is very very subjective. Some people say that you have to cover the entire thing, but yeah, there are some uh, Muslim people who are a little liberal. That means they don't follow all those things, but majority of the Muslim, they are very conservative, right? They will go to the lens to fight against it. So this is this. And most of the temples, the Hindu temples in India, is controlled by the state. And the abbot, right, the people who, I wouldn't say abbot exactly, but the people who handle the temple, right, the head, it is elected by the state. That means religion is not free from the state affairs. It should be, the premise of the entire thing is that even in ancient Roman and all this, that the church and the state has to be separate. It cannot be one, right? It has to be separate. But if the state is controlling the temple, then it's not a separate thing, right? And the money, the budget, everything has a control of the state. So that is the main problem. I don't know what he had argued in this particular book. I'm going to read about it. I'm just giving you my opinion, right? And the content number 2 is injustice towards Kashmiri Hindus. Still right now a lot of Hindus who has fled from the Kashmir in in the late 1900s and early 2000s because of the communal rights over there, Muslim and Hindu clashes. They had to flee from the Kashmir, their original home. And do they have any particular rights? I mean, what if they want to go back? So I think he might arguing about this. And then there comes the Waqf Act. All the properties of Muslim religion properties, the mosque and the surrounding premises and all those, it is controlled under the Waqf Act 1995. And if I'm not wrong, I'll Google it. They are the third largest owner of the property after railway and Indian Army. If I'm not wrong, just wait. Okay. How much property does Waqf? Is it Waqf or Waqf? Okay, nationwide Waqf. Just wait. Okay, I want to see the pronunciation. Waqf pronunciation.
Waqf is pronounced
Waqf. Okay, it's Waqf. Right. Okay, Waqf. Okay, Waqf. Okay. Waqf nationwide, Waqf boards collectively controls over 8.72 lakh properties spanning more than 38 lakh acres of land, valued at approximately 1.2 lakh crore. This makes the Waqf board India's third largest landowner, trailing only the railway, Indian Railway, and armed forces. Right. Waqf properties are distributed among 30 regional boards across the country. The top states by number of registered properties goes to Uttar Pradesh, over 2.1, and West Bengal, Punjab, Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. Type of property, the asset range widely and include mosque in Dargah, madrasas. Madrasas is equals to madrasas, also spelled madrasa, or this one literally translate to a place of study in Arabic, where while the term originally referred to any of type of institutions, education institute, secular, it is now primarily used to describe a school or college dedicated to Islamic theology and religious law. Madrasas. It is a school where most of the Islam madrasas. Okay, used by So who owns the Waqf property? That's okay. It's a Waqf board. I think it's a Waqf board. That's okay. So QF. Okay, Waqf. That's Waqf. Who owns Waqf property? Who owns the Waqf? No single person, organizations, or government owns Waqf property. Under Islamic law, once a property is dedicated as a Waqf, its ownership is transferred to Almighty God. The dedication is permanent. How it is managed: while God holds ownership, human entities manage the properties for public benefits. The Mutawali, private trustees or managers appointed to oversee the property daily. State Waqf reports to government appointed bodies that monitors this one. Okay, so I'll just because Indian temples, right? Okay, temples in India are under state control. Is it same with Waqf? Waqf QF. Okay, Waqf property. Is it same with the Waqf property? It should be same, because same state, same country. No, this is where the problem comes. No, the state control over Hindu temples is completely different from the governance of the Waqf properties. While the state government directly runs, manages, and collect revenue from thousands of large Hindu temples, Waqf properties operates under a model of community-led management with only statutory oversight from the government, direct control versus regulatory. Hindu temples in several states, especially in South India, major temples are governed by the state-enacted Hindu religious and charitable endowments. To act under this framework, government-appointed bureaucrats directly manage temple operations. Appointed priest control daily administrative and decisions oversee this one. Waqf properties, mosque and Waqf are assets are not directly run by the government bureaucrats. They managed by local private custodian called Mutawalis. The state Waqf board behaves primarily as a statutory regulator, ensure the Mutawalis comply with the laws rather than stepping in into this one. Okay, utilization of revenue funds. Now, this is the interesting thing, right? Hindu temple. The revenue collected at Hindu government control goes to the state managed account. State government can legally allocate a portion of these funds towards administrative salaries, public welfare schemes, or infrastructure project or after the temple immediate religious needs. Work properties, the income generated gathered by these funds belong exclusively to that specific endowment. It cannot be pulled into a common government treasuries. Okay, so now this is the problem, right? If the Hindu people, the temple, their revenues can be used for any other state welfare projects, which includes not only Hindu, Muslim, Buddhist, Sikhs, all those people, but with respect to, and it is directly controlled by the state. But if it is the opposite one, if it is the Muslim properties and mosque and all those things, it will be particularly used for their own, really, for this particular people, rich, this particular society, and it is not under the influence, or there's no connection with respect to the state. That is interesting. Compositions of managing bodies. Hindu temple, the leadership and the top administration post of HR, NCE department consists entirely of the government employees. The work properties are statutory bodies composed heavily of the communities representative, including Muslim MPs, MLAs, so Islamic scholars, and mutawalas. Okay. So now this is the real problem, right? And this is just the pinnacle of it. So right now there is a Sapar Maile, okay, there is a Ayatollah, okay, just no, not Ayatollah, Ayatpalli. I just wait, okay. Kerala, okay, temple of Kerala temple, Kerala temple of women discrimination, CRIMI discrimination case pending in Supreme Court. So that is even more, this one, the Kerala, okay, it is currently pending 9-judge constitution bench of this one. So Kerala temple of women discrimination, okay, yeah, it is called Sabarimala, okay, Sabarimala Ayat, Ayappa temple, Sabarimaya Ayat temple. So there is a case going on with this respect to this also in the temple, which states that, okay, that particular temple, right, it states that women age between okay, I just don't want to get it wrong, so verdict, okay, so this is equals to, okay, Sabarmila, okay, Sabarmila, okay, Sabarmali, okay, Sabarmala, okay, Sabarmala case detailed explanation. So this is basically an overview of what is happening, right? So okay, I'll give you an example. Give you the entire details of it, right? The case name is Sabarmala, okay, the Sabarmala case, okay, the it's not Sabarmala, it's Sabarimala, okay, Sabarimala. The Sabarimala case is a landmark Indian legal dispute centered on the constitutional validity of restricting women age. Okay, so the temple, it's in the Kerala, and the name is Sabarimala case. So the problem here is that I'm not talking about the problem, but I'm just stating the facts that this temple, there's a restrictions with respect to women aged between 10 to 50 from entering the Sabarimala temple in Kerala. And there was a case filed against the temple stating that this is a discrimination against a women, and the Supreme Court ruled in 2018 that the ban violated a fundamental rights, though a broader religious question remains under review by 9 bench. Okay, so there was in 2018 there was a judgment which says that this is a discrimination and this is a violation of fundamental rights. So that's why they passed a resolution stating that there should not be any of those restrictions. And the core issue is Sabramala is a prominent pilgrimage site in Kerala dedicated to Lord Ayappa. So okay, let me look at what is the Lord Ayappa looks like. Ayappa. So Lord Ayappa is a highly revered Hindu deity in South India, known as the true, god of truth, righteousness, and self-discipline. He is believed to be the divine son of Lord Shiva and Mohini, the female avatar of Vishnu. He is primarily adopted. Okay. So Lord Ayappa, that's okay. Ayappa and Sabarimala, okay, Sabarimala. And historically, to uphold the deity, the delicacy, okay, so historically, and the women's are age between 10 to 15 are restricted because to uphold the deity's celibacy. The temple customarily buried women of menstruating age, roughly 10 to 50 years old, from entering the premises. And 1991, the Kerala High Court upheld the ban, concluding that the custom was justified and did not violate the women's constitutional rights. In 1991, the Kerala High Court upheld the ban. In 2006, the Indian Young Lawyer Association filed a public interest litigations in the Supreme Court, challenging the ban on the grounds that it was a gender discriminatory and derogatory to women. And in 2018, Supreme Court judge, in September 2018, a 5-judge constitution bench delivered a historic 4-1 verdict striking down the ban. And 4-1 is in the favor of the striking of the ban, and 1 is against the striking. That means you have to respect the religion, right? And the irony or the crazy thing is that the one who has this one 4-1, the one who has ruled in favor of the ban, it's a woman. So the majority view, Justice Deepak Mishra, F.R. Narimanst, A.M. Khanwilar, and D.Y. Chandrachud, he later will become the Chief Justice of India, ruled that the exclusion violated the fundamental rights to equality, Article 14, and freedom of religions, 25 for female worshippers. They struck down Rule number 3B of the Kerala Hindu places of public worship, authorizations of entry, Rules 1965, which had previously allowed religious denomination to exclude women based on custody. Now, the dissenting view, Justice Indu Malhotra, argued that just judicial interference in the matters of the deep religion faith is unwarranted. She stated that religious practices should be protected under Article 25, regardless of whether they appear rational, emphasizing that essentiality of religion's practices should be determined by the religious belief rather than the courts. Now, the problem here is that now there's a conflict in the article or the constitution itself, right? Because under constitution, Article 14 says that right to equality, everyone has an equal right. And Article 14, right to equality, and then Article 25 talks about the freedom of religions. You're free to practice your own religion, and freedom of religion for female worshippers, right? They struck down Rule 3 of this one. Okay, so that was in 2018. This was the rule. Okay, so there's this one conflict in conflict of rule in itself. Just first, Article 14 talks about the right to equality. Article 25 talks about the right to freedom of religion. But there is an Article 25. It says that she stated that religious practices should be protected under Article 25. So Article 25 also says that religious practices, that means what has been culturally practiced from a long time, it should be protected. Now they have to remove one of those things, which will supersede the other, right? Because he started that religious practices should be protected under Article 25, regardless of whether they appear rational, emphasizing that essentiality of a religion practices should be determined by the religion itself rather than the courts. So yeah, we'll deep deeper into Article 25. Article 25. Article 25 of the Indian Constitution guarantees all persons the fundamental right to freedom of conscience and the right to freely profess practices and propagate religion. These rights are available to both citizens and non-citizens, but are subject to public order, morality, health, and other fundamental rights. Freedom of conscience, the inner freedom of an individual to shape their relationship with the divine or their belief without external interference. Right to profess, the right to openly and freely declare one's religion, belief, and faith. Right to practice, the right to perform rituals, the right to propagate, the right to transmit and disseminate one's religion, belief to others. However, the Supreme Court has clarified that this does not include the okay. Now, the problem here is that there's a two thing, right? The Supreme Court is the ultimate, the judge, right? Ultimate judge in a sense that if you don't agree with his decision, Supreme Court's decision, then you cannot fight anymore because you go district, state, high court, and then Supreme Court, right? So this was the decision in 2018 of the Supreme Court, stating that everyone should be equal, but they've said that there's a discrimination. But the problem is that there are temples in India where the men are restricted. That means the men cannot enter those temples. Then what about those things? Are this not discrimination? So I'll tell you, okay, the name of the temples. Temple names where men are restricted. So that is the problem with India. Not just India, I'm just talking about it, right? Several temples in India restrict the entry of a man either completely or during a specific festival and ritual. These rules are typically rooted in specific mythological, legends, traditions, honoring feminine energy or observance of the female-centric ceremonies. The Brahman temple, Pushkar, Rajasthan, this shrine prohibits married men from entering the inner sanctum. So according to mythology, goddesses Sarvaswati cursed the temple, stating that the married men who will interfere with marital discord. And Kumari Amman temple, it's in Kanyakumari temple, located near the southern tip of the mainland India. This temple restricts married men from entering the inner sanctums. Only celibate men, sannyasis, and women are allowed to enter the portion of this one. Now, where is the discrimination, right? It's the same thing. But just wait, okay? And I'll tell you about the Sabarmala, case in details. So now the current status is, following the 2018 verdict, the ruling sparked a massive protest in Kerala. So the people were very angry there that even the court has said that okay, the women can enter 10 to 50, but they weren't, because there was a there was a protest in there was a huge protest in Kerala, with traditionalists arguing that the state was interfering with essential religious custom. Numerous review petitions were filed against the 2018 judgment. In 2019, a five-judge bench decided to refer to the constitutional equations to a larger nine-bench. So now they have, again, right now, the restriction, right, the ban, the restrictions on the ban is upheld. That means there's no ban, the women can enter, but still a five-judge bench decided to refer the constitutional questions to a larger nine-bench judge bench, and the expanded nine judge is actively hearing the matters to settle both legal principle regarding the extent to which is okay. So then what is the argument with respect to fact that some men are restricted in entering some temples, right? Because if you're saying that discrimination, it is discrimination, then it's also true that the temples where the women are not restricted. The argument regarding temples that restrict certain categories of women are frequently cited by traditionalists and legal scholars to counter accusations of an absolute gender discrimination at Sabrimala. This point used to demonstrate that temple restrictions are often rooted in a specific theology, theological rituals and nature of the deity rather than general misogyny. The argument of the theological specificity. Proponents of traditional custom argue that the restriction in Hindu temples, whether targeting men, women, or specific groups, are based on uniquely identifying about the presiding deity, Agama Shastra. The deity is a living under the Indian law. A temple deity is treated as a juristic person with specific rights and characteristics. Custom of a gender. This restriction is framed not as a discrimination against a gender, but as adherence to a specific. Examples of a temple restricting men: Ayakula temple, Chakula, Kukula temples, Kamakya temple, Assam, Brahman temple, Rajasthan. The legal counter argument. So what is the argument? During the Sabrimala hearing, the Supreme Court addressed these comparisons with a different constitutional lens. Systematic exclusion versus isolated custom. The court noted that there's a differences between a temporary restriction during a specific festival like Tuitala Bhagwadi and the permanent institutional exclusion of entire demographic based on biological characteristics and menstruations. The essence religion practices test. For a restriction to be constitutionally protected under Article 26, freedom to manage religious affairs, the temple must prove the practice is an essential and foundational part of the religion. The majority in 2018 ruled that the exclusion of a woman at Sabrimala did not meet this threshold, whereas specific ritual in other temples have not faced the systematic. Okay, but now what is the current status? Okay, what is the current status? It's still under. I think the court will soon give a judgment, 9-bench judgment, and the Supreme Court under the right now Chief Justice of India, Surya Kant. The Supreme Court of India has reserved its judgment. So that means it states that they have recently, I think 1 week or 2 week back, they've heard all the arguments from all the sides, and now they will go back to their drawing rooms. And it's not this case. Okay, now they've referred to 9-bench judge bench, and they're going to do the constitution, or just to make a proper law for not just this, for others also. So given an example, the Supreme Court of India has reserved a judgment on the landmark Sabrimala reference case after concluding a marathon 16-day hearing. The 9-judge constitution bench led by Chief Justice Surya Kant wrapped up daily arguments on May 14, 2026. The court is now deliberating and will release its final verdict at a later date. The key details of the recent proceeding, the court debates. The 9-judge bench did not focus. Okay, so the thing is that they did not focus only on the Sabrimala. Instead, it used the case to review the overarching relationship between religious freedoms and the fundamental rights to equality. Article 25-26 talks about the religious freedoms, and the fundamental right to equality talks about Article 14. The essential religious practices test. The major focus was whether the judiciary should discern or perform the ERP test, a legal document where secular courts decide what is essential religions. Now the interesting thing is that right now the government, the BJP, the ruling government with their coalition government, they wanted to pass UCC bill, that is Unified Civil Code, or I think it is Unified Civil Code. That's okay. Unified Civil Code. Okay, civil code. Uniform. Okay, it's a uniform. UCC, Uniform Civil Code. That means one law for all the people in the country. Uniform Civil Code (UCC) is a proposal to establish a single uniform set of personal law governing marriage, divorce, inheritance, adoptions of all the Indian citizens, replacing religion-based laws outlined as the directive principles in Article 44 of the Indian Constitution. It remains a heavily debated topic. So the government wants to, you know, the government wants to pass the UCC Uniform Civil Code bill so that there's no differences with respect to different law for a different religion or people. So they wanted to get this UCC. And just wait, okay, I want to see how many votes does to pass this, how many percentage of votes are required in Lok Sabha. I think it's 50%, right? 50 or one third, 66.67. Okay, I think it is one. Okay, so which means more than, okay, so needs an ordinary piece of legislation. It requires a simple majority. That means it needs more than 50%. The member present and voting in the votes in favor, right? It's okay. If 100% attendance, all this ones, a minimum of 272 votes is needed to pass the bill. Okay, so this is what it needed, and they wanted to pass this bill, right? Now the problem comes in 2018. It says that it is a discrimination. I'm talking about the Sabarimala case. Okay, Sabarimala case, right? It says that women's are. It is a discrimination. That means everyone should be treated equally. Now in 2019, it's going to be not sure what it's going to be, but if the court, right, the court judgment led by Chief Justice of India, Surya Kant, if they decide that it is not a discrimination and each religion should, they have the right to practice, then this will affect the UCC, because then they have to reverse the judgment of the 2018. And if they reverse the judgment of India 2018, that means the women cannot enter the temple age between 10 to 50, because it is the religious belief, and court should not interfere. Then what is applied is that, okay, so this is with respect of Hindu, and okay, the Muslim people will say that if Hindus are getting this one star, the right to practice their own religion, then we should also get. That means we also should be under the here Muslim Sharia law. We can every man can have right to marry certain number of the have to have a right to have a certain number of wives, and we will not follow any of those things. Then the problem comes, it is very difficult to apply or to pass the bill, Uniform Civil Code. Each the one single law, uniform law for all the people, irrespective of the religion. So now that is the main problem, right? So, and the court, right, if they uphold the 2018 judgment, that means, okay, if they say that this is a discrimination and even the women should get the should have right to practice, should be able to enter, that means it is a favorable position also for the current government to state that, okay, so this is also Hindus are compromising, or constitution is more important than the religion text. Then obviously it has to be applicable to the Muslim also, right? What you have to follow what constitution says. Then it's easier for them to follow the uniform civil code. Now I'll just read what the other arguments are. Okay. Key details of the recent proceeding, the court debates. The ninth judgment did not focus solely on the Sabarimala. Okay, instead it used the case to review the overarching relationship between the religious freedoms, Article 25, Article 26, and the fundamental rights to equality, Article 14. The essential religious practices ERP test. A major focus was whether the judiciary should discard or reform the ERP test, a legal doctrine. Okay, the union government stands. The central government filed a written submission urging the Supreme Court to uphold the traditional restrictions on women at Sabarimala. Sabarimala, the government argued that they should belong purely to the domain of the faith and denominational autonomy, placing it beyond the scope of a judicial review. Clubbed religious issues, because the ruling will establish a broad precedence for how law treats religious custom. The court simultaneously consider three or other major pending cases. The right of the Muslim women to enter mosque. Okay, so here also, right? Okay, so I think there are some restriction with respect to the women also entering the mosque. The right of the Muslim women to enter mosque. The right of a Parsi women to marry outside their faith to enter the fire temples. I think in Parsi, if the woman marries a person who is outside their community or the religion, then their sacked from their religion, right? They are deemed, out of the religion, the Parsi religions. The legality of the female genital mutilations practiced within the Dawoodi Bohara community. What next? What happens next? 2018 judgment technically remains the legal law. So right now it's still legal, right? Okay, because there's no new judgments. The 2018 judgment technically remains legal law, which permits women of all ages to enter the temple because it was never formally stayed. However, the actual implementation has been effectively deterred on the grounds pending this once. Once the nine-judge bench delivers this reserved verdict, it will conclusively decide whether the 2018 judgment stance gets modified or is completely overturned. Okay, when is the decision expected to be announced? So this is very important. This is going to be a landmark judgment. There's no fixed or announced date for the events this one's okay, because the nine-judge bench has concluded its 16-day marathon hearing and reserved a judgment on 14th May. That means it's more than now 8 days. And okay, the timeline is currently at the discretion of the courts. A month of deliberation in the complex launch. Okay, this one it typically takes the Supreme Court several weeks to a few months to draft, the coordinate, and release the final judgment. Okay, so now they have to make the entire law with respect to it. Has to be very specific. Writing multiple opinions, because the bench consists of 9 judges, they will be reviewing extensive written submissions, which often results in a multiple concurring or dissenting opinion that will take time. This one's okay. Okay, you can take, right? Okay, but okay, it has mentioned, right? You mentioned that, okay, since central government gave their application to court for respecting the religion practices and reverse the judgment of 2018, then is it not gonna make current central government pass the uniform civil code bill? Current, okay, then is it not going to make current central government pass the uniform difficult? Yeah, it's going to make it very difficult then, right? Because the Muslim will also say that will not follow it and all those things. The central government stance supporting the traditional practices in the Sabri case does appear contradictory to its push. Yes, that's what I'm saying, exactly. The central government stance supporting traditional practices in the Sabri case does appear contradictory to its push for a national uniform civil code, but legally and politically the government treats them as two completely separate issues. While it introduces the political talking points of the critics, it is unlikely to make the passing a USCC legally more difficult due to how Indian law separates rituals from civil status. The legal distinctions, ritual versus civil. Okay, so it could be a ritual, is it? Ritual versus civil law. The main reason this contradiction does not legally block a UCC is the distinction between religious rituals and civil personal laws. Sabarimala is an issue of ritual practices. Okay, so it is not it is okay. It's a ritual practices. Sabarimala is an issue of ritual practices. The debate over temple entry focuses strictly on religious worship, sacred traditions, and temple management. The government argues the courts should not micromanage temple customs or spiritual belief. UCC is an issue of a civil administration. Article 44. Uniform Civil Code deals strictly with the secular, civil contracts like the marriage, divorce, inheritance, adoption. The Supreme Court has repeatedly clarified that the UCC is a constitutional ambition designed for this way, keeping the state separate. The UN can argue that it protects the religion custom in place of the worships, while simultaneously demanding a similar the current strategy state by state to roll out. And okay, yeah. So right now, most those governments, state governments, whose ruling party is BJP, they have rolled out the uniform civil code. And yeah, for example, like Uttarakhand became the first state independent India to fully implement the UCC in Jan 2025, and Gujarat also successfully passed its own uniform civil code in March 2026. Other states, including Madhya Pradesh, Assam, have set an active timeline to state this ones because marriage and succession falls under the concurrent list of the Indian Constitution. Individual states have the full legal authority to pass legal without needing a federal bill. Political implication challenges acquisition of selective inconsistency. Opposition parties and minority group argue that the government position is a contradictory. Critics ask why the state claims it must intervene to protect women's rights by overriding Muslim personal law. Okay, I just want to know: are Muslim women restricted to enter mosque? I think they can, but Muslim, okay. Let's see. No, Islamic text and doctrine do not restrict or ban Muslim women for entering the mosque to offer prayer. However, there's a significant differences between the theological rules of Islam and the actual ground reality of our mosque corporates in India. The official legal and theological stance in April 2026 during the Supreme Court judgment hearing, the All India Muslim Personal Law Board explicitly stated that they're free to enter. A Muslim woman is completely free to enter a mosque to offer namaz prayers. There is no core scripture tenets or decree in Islam that prohibits women from entering. Exempted, not prohibited. Unlike the Muslim men, for whom attending congregational prayers in mosques is a religious mandatory, women are exempted from this obligation. Islamic tradition says that women can pray at homes and receive the exact same spiritual reward. Rules and discipline within the mosque entry. Okay, well, entry is permitted. The clarified the Supreme Court that the women must adhere to established religious discipline and practices. No free mixing. Men and women are strictly required to pray in segregated areas. Separate entrances. Women cannot insist on entering through the main front gate used by the men if a separate entrance is designated for them. Okay, so there is a little thing with this, okay, that the women cannot enter from the front gate, the main gate. Prayer formation. Because of the physical posture involved in Islamic prayer, women cannot stand in the same rows as the men and generally pray in a separate hall or behind the partitions. The reality on the ground is to lack of infrastructure. Unlike mosque in Middle East or India were historically built without separate prayer halls, absolute abolition area, women are effectively excluded from entering the in practice. Okay, denomination differences. Certain progressive or specific denominations such as the Aliyah has actively built infrastructures to welcome female worshippers, while more conservative local management discourages it, advising women that it is better to pray at home. Okay. Can non-Muslim enter mosque? I don't know. I'm a Buddhist. I don't know. Yes, legally and ideologically, non-Muslims are permitted to enter mosque. However, entry depends on the specific, geography, location, theological basis too. According to mainstream Islamic jurisprudence on Sharia, non-Muslims are allowed to enter mosque for peaceful and respectful purposes, such as learning, visiting, or interfaith dialogue. Historical precedents, Islamic history record the Prophet Muhammad hosted a relegations. Okay, global versus local history, international Turkey, versus Turkey. Okay, so this is the entire thing. I've talked about the Uniform Civil Code. I've talked about this. Now we'll continue with the book Hindu in Hindu Nations or Hindu Rashtra. Sabarimala. Okay, Sabarimala. It's very difficult for me to remember this particular name. I don't know. Sabarimala. I just mistakenly say like Sabrimila. Sabarimala. Okay, Sabarimala. So now the Work Act 1995, the RT, right to education. It could be the right to education. Is it? The RT Act, legislation that appeases non-Hindu but targets Hindus. Okay, judiciaries that almost exclusively tries to reform Hinduism, celebrating those who killed and converted millions of Hindus. Place of Worship Act 1991. Epilogue, afterwards notes and references, acknowledgements and index. Now I will start forward. For far too long, independent India has not allowed the followers of its indigenous Bharatiya faith system, the Hindu, the right to hold grievances, much less air them. After all, we are told Hindus are in the majority, so what possible grievance could we have? Despite the bloody partitions of our sacred geography, Bharat, on avowedly in religious lines in 1947, Hindus are told that being in the majority is sin enough, which requires constant and unequivocal expression of contributions in every sphere to reassure some minorities, those who identify themselves with the Islamic invaders, settler, colonizers, and Christian European colonizers, of their safety and dignity. This reassurance, as Dr. Anand Ranganathan rightly points out in this book, takes two forms: the positive, through a political appeasement of minorities, and negative, through legal yet unconstitutional discriminations of Hindus, as Anand bluntly observes in this book. Bluntly means without any without any facade, just purely, right? Okay, speaking or acting in a direct, straightforward manners, usually without attempting to be polite, tactful, or kind. Okay, so just to be blunt. And bluntly observes in the books, while political appeasement continues unabated even under the current dispensations, it is the entrenched discrimination against the Hindus through the instrumentalities of the law that causes greatest and long-term harm to the survival of Hindus. Accordingly, in this book, as a cultural Hindu, Anand has pressed into services. Okay, so to be exactly clear, Anand is he was born into a Hindu, but right now he is a Darwinian atheist. He calls himself as a Darwinian atheist. Anand has pressed into services scientific bent of a mind and formidable powers of analysis to identify 8 illustrations of a discrimination against Hindu in a Hindu majority country. Discrimination that continues under a supposedly pro-Hindu dispensations. from state control of Hindu religion institutions to arming up in a predatory and an expansionist mindset with the Work Act of 1955, to denial of the Kashmiri Hindu Holocaust, and to perpetual and relentless reformist scrutiny of the Hindu way of life, to state endorsements of the continuing Islamic, triumphalisms through the places of worship, Act of 1991. So Anand has chosen to lend his powerful voice to the ongoing Sanatani movement for reclamations of the Dharmic identity in space. In this, in animatable style, through this example, which are dealt with crisply and substantiations. Anand has demonstrated the central thesis of his exposition that Hindu were and continue to be eighth-class citizens, regardless of who holds the reign of the power, and that tokenism without long-term policy changes is being used to keep the community in a good humor. Understandably, to a non-Abrahamic indigenous community, which is an unconscious global minority and a deliberately fragmented national majority, any political option that merely vocalizes its interest without effecting of policy change despite building power must come across as a breath of an age, fresh air. However, given the increasingly active legal encroachments and simultaneous comatose sessions of the Hindu spaces, both physical and mental, the time has come to all the speed. Okay, the time has come to call a spade and expect concrete steps to undo the continuing damage to Hindu interests. These books, which act as a primer on the specific issues eating into the vitals of the Hindu community, is a must read. It serves as a fantastic starting point for those who wish to delve deeper into each of the issues enumerated by Anand, and issues that are either related or of a similar nature. I thank Anand for the understanding this, undertaking this task, and for adding to the growing literatures of the Indic Dharmic Renaissance. I wish this book all success, and I hope it reawakens in more hearts and minds. This is Sai Deepak, J. Sai Deepak, and now we have one more forward. Okay, just wait. What is the differences between? Just wait. Okay, what is the differences between forward and preface, and then there's a prologue also, right? Okay, a forward is written by someone other than the author, usually an expert or notable figure, to endorse the books. The preface is written by author to explain the book's origin, purpose, and the journey of writing. Okay, so this is the forward and this is the preface. Okay, preface is equals to the forward equals to it is written by someone expert. Okay, and then what is the prologue?
Prologue.
A prologue, right? Okay, a piece of writing or a speech that is introduced as a play or a poem. Okay, so is prologue, okay, or epilogue, preface, same. Yeah, in a prologue and a preface. A preface speaks about the book, while a prologue is the opening act of the book. Okay, so first is equals to forward is given by someone who is an expert, and a preface speaks about the book. Preface speaks about the book, while a prologue is the opening act of the book. Okay, prologue is the opening act, but the preface speaks about the book. Okay, perspective. Okay, preface equals to perspective, purposes, and prologue equals to purpose. So speaking the author, characters within the story, is it a part of the plot? Okay, and then there is one more, if I'm not wrong. Okay, the prologue. Okay, aberrant prologue. Ever since Mahatma Gandhi succeeded in controlling this nation's pulse, we have witnessed majority appeasements on an unprecedented scale, sometimes as virtue signaling, and at other times as placations of victimhoods. To illustrate, but one instance of the extent to which he was committed to realizing this wrapped visions while preaching to those affected by the pre-partition Hindu-Muslim violences, he urged Hindus should not harbor anger in the heart against Muslim, even if the latter wanted to destroy them. Even if the Muslim wants to kill us all, we should face death bravely. If they establish their rule after killing Hindus, we would be ushering in a new world of sacrificing our lives. Right from the Caliphate movement to the cushioning of the Moplas massacre to the Rangila Rasool incidents to blatantly discriminatory states and central articles and amendments to schools curriculums to Hajj subsidy to ignoring the prohibitions of a child marriage act to Shah Bano to the declarations by sitting prime minister that minorities have the first to right to resources. Every single time the minority has been appeased, it has only embodied their leaders and political reforms for further extortions and blackmail. This has come to an enormous cost not only for their own community but also for the Hindu. The question, though, is not for appeasement. Yes, appeasement is discriminatory, of course it is, but worse than appeasement is the active discrimination against the community not being appeased. Worse than appeasements of one community is the apartheid against the other communities. Okay, I just want to know the exact definition of apartheid. It was originated in Africa, where the constitution, right, the constitutions under the constitution itself, they try to discriminate the particular sections apartheid meaning Okay, so apartheid means the former official government policy in South Africa of separating people of different races and making them live apart. So apartheid means, okay, that is the apartheid. What is the meaning of apartheid? Apartheid meaning is to separateness in Africanness. Okay, so apartheid meaning literal definition itself is separateness in Africans. It was legalized system of institutional racial segregations and discrimination in South Africa and in Southwest Africa, now Namibia from 1948 until the 1990s. It ensured political and economic dominance for the white minority over the non-white majority. Okay, so apartheid, right? Okay, and okay, what is Nairobi? Nairobi, okay, Kenya. It's the capital city of Kenya. Okay, and okay, where was I? The question though is for the appeasement. Yes, appeasement is discriminatory, of course it is, but worse than appeasement is the active discrimination against the community not being appeased. Worse than appeasement of one community is apartheid against the other communities. Truth be told, appeasement may rankle, but Indians have learned to accept it, even take it in their stride, for they realize the reasons for appeasements are political, and those reasons are modifications of vote banks to win elections. Every political party cutting across ideologies and religious affiliations or labels indulge in appeasement. So while our Muslim population is 14.2% in the last 8 years, as many okay, so while our Muslim population is 14.2% in the last 8 years, as many as 31.3% of the home under the Awas Yojana, 33% of the funds under the Kisan Saman Nidhi Yojana, and 36% of the loan under the Mudra Yojana have gone to the Muslims. The BJP government has a Pradhan Mantri Shadi Shagun scheme exclusively for the Muslim girls who complete their graduation before marriage. They will get 51,000, no question asked. Housing, skilling, scholarships, sarkari job salaries to Malvis. There is an appeasement and preferential treatment meted out to the minorities by every political party, including the BJP. The BJP recently, even offered Christian senior citizens a free trip to Jerusalem if they voted for it. Fact is, Ram Raja and Rome Raja are interchangeably, depending upon which way the wind is blowing. No, the issue, I repeat, is of the appeasement. The issue is of the apartheid. The issue is of a state-sponsored, state-sanctioned discrimination against a particular community, and the community is the majority community, the Hindus. This work concerns not appeasement but the apartheid. It concerns not dignity but discrimination that is now so entrenched in our constitutions, our policies, our legal frameworks, our society and our psyche, that it makes Hindu not just second-class citizens but rather eighth-class citizens. That is happening in the so-called Hindu Rashtra is profoundly ironical. Here, there are 8 reasons why Hindu are eighth-class citizens in their own country. The first is state control of Hindu temples. State control of Hindu temples and their property is by far the largest, financially most damaging scam of independent India. That is not only continues but flourishes. Okay, I'll just give you a little fact that Indian temples are very, 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 very rich. They have a lot of golds. They have lots and lots of donations, money, all those things. I think if put into perspective, the revenue or the property of the temple would be more than the GDP of some small countries. Uh, that it not only continues but flourishes under the present government is a sad reflection of how politicians in our country treat Hindus. Even using the petroleum sector as a cash cow pales in comparison to the loot and pillaging of the Hindu temples. I do not know how and why it is beyond limits of comprehensions of the flag bearers of the secularism. Okay, first I want to search, right? Does secularism, what is the definition of a secularism? I want to know what is the definition of secularism. Secularism, the belief that religion should not influence or be involved in the organization of society, educations, and government, etc. Okay, then India is not a secular country. The belief that religion should not influence or be involved. So, what is the exact definition of okay? Secularism means a separation of religion from political, economic, social, and cultural aspect of life. Religion being treated as a purely personal matter, it emphasizes dissociation of the state from religions, and full freedom to all religions and tolerance of all religions. Okay, and I do not know, and I do not know how and why it is beyond the limits of the comprehensions of the flag bearers of secularism. That if you truly believe that religion should be kept out of the state, the corollary is equally applicable, that the state should be kept out of religions. But is it? Secularism is total separation of religion and state. Okay, then the very definition is not fulfilled, right? Because in India, most of the religion properties, the Hindu temples and all, are owned and controlled by the state. the state. I'm not talking about the country, but the state, each state. Then how is it India a secular country? Secularism is total separation of religions and state. Total, there are half a dozen articles and amendments and directive principles in our constitutions that make it plural, not secular. In fact, the word secular was inserted in our preamble by Indira Gandhi during emergency. It was absent from Ambedkar's constitution. Our state declared itself to be secular, but it is shamelessly not so, regulating, governing, and controlling as it does Hindu places of worship. Okay, just wait. Okay, and then I want to know this one also. What is the definition of socialism? Because even in the constitution, right, the socialism, the word, it was not there, but it was added by Indira Gandhi in during emergency 1970 something. Socialism as an is an economic and political philosophy advocating for a collective or a public ownership of the means of production. Okay, public, this one, collective or a public ownership of the means of the production rather than the private ownership. In this system, resources are managed to directly fulfill human needs and ensures social equality rather than to generate a private property. So then, okay, so that there's a capitalism, there's a socialism. Then, could India be considered a capitalist country while constitution itself says it is socialist? Okay, yes, India can be and heavily is considered a capitalist leaning country today, despite the word socialist remaining in its constitution. This apparent contradiction exists because India's actual economic system has drastically evolved over time, while the legal text of constitution reflects a specific political moment in history and uniquely broad definition of a word socialism. Today, India operates as a mixed economy, combining a dominant capitalist market structure with a robust state welfare framework. And okay, so how the word socialist got there? The original 1950 Indian constitution did not contain the word socialist. The founding father, including B.R. Ambedkar and Jawaharlal Nehru, deliberately left it out because they did not want to tie down future generation to any single rigid economic dogma. Term was added much later in 1976 by the 42nd Constitution Amendment during the national emergency under Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. It was introduced as a political and symbolic commitment to eliminating poverty and inequality rather than the mandate to ban private businesses. The Supreme Court, democratic socialism. To resolve the contradiction between the constitutional text and reality, India's Supreme Court stepped into it legally to define what socialism means in the Indian context. The judiciary established that Indian socialism is a democratic socialism, which is entirely distinct from Marxist or state-controlled communism. It does not mean state ownership of all property. Instead, it aims to a welfare states model that the goal is to eradicate poverty or to provide equal opportunities and look after vulnerable populations while happily coexisting with the private capital. 1991, pivot to capitalism. India leaned heavily in socialist-style policies. The era was known for the license rush, where the government heavily restricted private businesses, strictly regulated import and controlled massive state-run monopolies. However, as a severe economic and balance of payment crisis, 1991 forced India to abandon its path and dismantle the license rush to allow the dispensed. Allowed market forces. Okay, summary of India's current economic reality. Today, India is widely characterized as a capitalist market economy with a heavy layer of state welfare. The country splits its economic identity into two halves. The capitalist side, wealth generation, is driven by the massive private corporation startup ecosystem, billionaires, citizens buy and sell private property, invest. Okay, the welfare side. To fulfill its constitutional socialist mandate, the state operates same as some of the world's largest public welfare systems, including food subsidies, guaranteed rural. To remove the word, socialist. Just wait. Is any government or party planning to remove this word? The government of India has officially stated that it has no plans or intention to remove the word socialist and secular from the preamble of the constitutions. While ruling government is not initiating changes, individual politicians, right-wing socialist government, and private legal petitioners have repeatedly made pushes to drop the word. The official government stance. Union Law Minister Arun Ram Mehta clarified that the government's official position in the parliament. He explicitly stated that the central government had not formally initiated any legal or constitutional process to adopt these terms. Action by individual politicians, the private, this one's members bills. Individual members of the member of parliament from the ruling part, Bharatiya Janata Party has occasionally introduced a private legislation proposal. For example, BJP, this one introduces a private member bill and the Rajya Sabha seeking an amendment to drop the terms. These bills are introduced by the independent lawmaker. Ideological arguments. The Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, the ideological parent organization of the BJP, along with the various conservative leaders, have
frequently call for a public review of these terms. Their primary argument is historical. They believe that the words were inserted undemocratically by Indira Gandhi government during the 1976 emergency. Okay, the final stance of the Supreme Court. The highest legal barrier, highest legal barrier to removing socialists came directly from the judiciary. The Supreme Court of India formally dismissed a batch of petitions that legally challenged the inclusion of socialist and secular. The petition prominent political figures, including former MP Subramaniam Swamy and advocate Jashwini Desmond, filed a pleas against, arguing that 1976 amendment was retroactively forced into a document adopted in 1949. The Supreme Court rejected the plea and declaring that there was no legitimate justification to order. Okay, just wait. And is India really a secular state country? Legally and constitutionally, India is a secular country, but its practical implementation is highly complex, distinct from Western models, and subject to intense national debate. In the late 2024, the Supreme Court of India officially reaffirmed that secularism is an indelible part of the basic structure of the constitutions, meaning Parliament cannot legally remove or destroy it. However, whether India is truly secular in practice depends on this one. India and the Western definition of secularism. The Western model, example France and USA, follows a strict wall of separation. The state is completely blind to religion, so religion is treated purely as a private affair. The Indian models, Sarva Dharma Savamba, translates to equal respect for all the religion. Instead of separating itself from faith, the Indian state maintains an equal distinct argument that India is a secular, is no state religion. Like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, India has no official national religions. Fundamental rights, this one again, judicial information. Argument that India is not secular, the existence of a personal law. A major critique points out that the truly secular state should have one law for all citizens. Yes, that's the thing. If India is a secular state, then there is no one law for all the people. India has a separate religion legal codes for marriage, divorce, and inheritance. Marriage, divorce, family rights. Marriage, divorce, and inheritance. Hindu codes, Muslim personal laws. Some states like Uttarakhand, state management of religious properties. The state government heavily regulates and tax massive Hindu temples, while endowments boards, while leaving mosque, churches, and gurudwaras largely to independent community managers. Critics argue that this constitution blatant state interference in one specific religion, the rise of the majoritarian politics, human rights watchdogs, and minority groups fit the textbook definition. India does not fit the textbook Western definition of a secular nation. It is legally engineered as an inclusive pluralist state. What is a pluralist state? Pluralism, right? So what is pluralist state? A pluralist state is a political system where power is distributed among various interest groups or civil organizations and institutions, rather than being concentrated in a single ruling elites or government alone. In this way, the state acts as a neutral referee balancing competing interests. Multiple centers of power. Pluralists argue that no single entity like the state or ruling class also have absolute power. The state is a referee in a competitive democracy. Inequality of resources. So it was absent from, I'm going back to the book. It was absent from Ambedkar's constitution. Our state declared itself to be secular, but it is shamelessly not so, regulating, governing, and controlling as it does to Hindu places of worship. Hindu temples have been for thousands of years the centers of worship, learning, community living, trade and economy, statecraft, and even defenses. Every invader has known that to dismantle India, you need to first dismantle the temple ecosystem. And every invader has managed it. What sets the British apart is that they managed to also pass the dismantling on to those they ruled and subjugated, and now the latter are continuing with the dismantling right from the Madras's regulations 1817 to the Religious Endowments Act 1863, Religious and Charitable Endowments Act 1925 to the Hindu Religions and Endowment Acts 1927 to Act 12 1935 to the Post-Independence Hindu Religions and Charitable Endowments Act 1951. Hindus have been at the receiving end of the state-sponsored loots and pillaging of their places of worship. And when the 1951 legislation was challenged in the Madras High Court, and subsequently the Supreme Court and most of the draconian provisions of the 1951 Act struck down, the Congress that was in the power then quickly passed the Hindu Religious and Charitable Endowment Act 1959, snubbing the court decree. 2 years ago, 2 years ago, the same Madras High Court dismissed a petition challenging the constitutional validity of this art, commenting that management of the temple has got nothing to do with the right to worship. A Hindu can worship as much as he wants. But I ask you, if the Congress can bring in a legislation to control the Hindu temples, one that still stands, why cannot the present government bring in a legislation to free Hindu temples? A petition by Swami Paramatmananda and Swami Dayananda Saraswati is pending in the Supreme Court since 2012. For more than 10 years, they can allow midnight hearing for granting mercy to the terrorists, but cannot spare time for this. In this plea, Swamiji gave the example of the Grand Ardhanashriyavara temple in Tirujingonde, Tamil Nadu. Even though the temple generates more than a crore in annual income, the budget earmarked for conducting a daily pujas and performing ritual is mere 1 lakh. Swami Dandakas did not live to see the day his beloved temples would be restricted from state control. He passed away in 2015. The government of just 10 states control more than 110,000 Hindu temples. The Tamil Nadu Temple Trust owns 478,000 acres of temple lands. Tamil Nadu government alone controls 36,425 temples and 56 mutts. For Karnataka, the figure is in 34,563. Is this what we call as secularisms? And they both in Tamil Nadu, it's led by right now the new governments, the TV and TVF or something, and in Karnataka it is controlled by the Congress government. Is this what we call secularisms? The communist state of Kerala has 5 Deva board Travancore, Guru Vakur, Cochin, Malabar, and Goda. Because together they manage 3,058 temples. So both of these 3 states, right, are non-BJP, state. The communists, for whom religion is supposedly the opium of the masses, are controlling Hindu temples, and they're appointing board members on their own whims and fancies. Many, either belong to the Communist Party or are card-carrying members of it. So why? What business is it of the state to levy administrative charges from anywhere between 5% to 21% of the Hindu temples in the name of an audit? What business is it of the state to dictate how many times the puja is to be conducted and who is to conduct and who is qualified to be the priest and what is going to be procedure for worship? What business is it of the state to control tens of thousands of acres of the temple and land and then set it rent for rate? Loss to the Hindu temples on accounts of this alone is estimated over decades to be in lakhs of crores. According to the activist and litigants, T.R. Ramesh, the Tamil Nadu government that should be earning a minimum of 6,000 crores per annum from the 2.44 crore square feet of temple land it controls, earns a mere 58 crores, not even 1%. The 1% could be 60 crores, okay? And Tamil controls on this one, and not even 1%. Kapileshwara temple is one of the richest temple in Tamil Nadu, owning more than 600 acres of the prime property in Chennai. State record shows it has 473 defaulters, with most of its land now encroached. And these are the estimates of the only one states because of this loss in revenue generation. Hindu temples are not able to spend money on what they would really like to spend money on. Opening up and pathshalas to schools and colleges, gaushalas to fellowships and scholarship, orphanage, Hindu cultural and religious centers, all things and causes other religions and their places of worship spend their money on unencumbered. Only in India can you step aside and watch as the state appoints non-Hindu Muslims like the Farhiyat Hakim, Christians like Wangala Puri, Anita on boards. They control Hindu temples. Only here we will remain silent as the temple idols installed in temple property auctions. The whole temple-driven ecosystem and a way of life dismantled. Assaults on temples has turned into an assault on Hinduism itself. Imagine a Hindu priest or a politician controlling and dictating how St. Francis Church or the Jama Masjid should be run. If that happens, perhaps our judiciary would indeed conduct a midnight hearing, crying death of secularisms. What is amusing is that the very same people who derisively call India a Hindu Rashtra are totally silent on the state control of the Hindu places of worship. They never stop to ask how on earth is this secularism. You can provide Hajj subsidies for decades, use taxpayer money to host grand iftar parties, fund MU that has only 1.4% of Dalit students and 0.25% of Dalit teachers, plunder state coffers to pay monthly salaries to tens of thousands of Maulvis, ask government-run UGC to fund Christian minority institutions that keep 50% of seats reserved for the Christians, step in to overturn a Supreme Court judgment just to appease Muslims, leech thousands of crores exclusively from Hindu temples and controls tens of thousands of acres of Hindu temple land, spends control hundreds of crores of taxpayers' money for the Qatar corridor. That is not instead of the states interfering or succumbing to the demands of the religion. Is this a secularism? The great Mahakaleshwar temple, its revenue, its realty is tightly controlled by the Madhya Pradesh state governments through the Mahakaleshwar Mandir Act 1982, from appointing pujaris down to even the size of the Prasadam Laddu. South India, Tirupati's hundi collections from April to September 2022 alone amounts to 782 crores. Now the government valuation of its property is out, 7,123 acres valued at 85,705 crores. But secularism means the temple comes under religions, institutions and charitable endowments acts until a high court orders that was issued recently. Andhra Pradesh Hindu Religious Institutions Act used to force temples that earn 5 lakhs or more to pay 21.5% of their income to the endowments department. Now the state has issued order to set up the Dharmika Parishads with draconian power to form temple trust boards and extend land lease. Is this secularism? More than 2 years have gone by since the Tamil Nadu government informed the Madras High Court that 11,999 temples under its control do not have enough money to perform even a single puja. But then again, I ask, largely overriding the Supreme Court verdict. If the Congress can bring in a legislation to control Hindu temples in 1959, one that still stands. Why could not the present government bring in a legislation to override it in the last 9 years? Why has it brought in even more Hindu temples under the state control than it was achieved by the previous dispensation? Why does the present government gloat on constructing a temple corridors like the one in Akashi at the cost of 39 crores when it could have relinquished control over Hindu temples and allowed the latter to fund hundreds of such corridors over the length and breadth of its country? As far as I'm concerned, that Hindu temple should be publicly listed as a company. After all, it supplies a product that people buy, peace of mind and reassurance. And unlike the other companies that need to constantly refine or come up with the better products, the temple's product has not changed in a millennium and never will. Indians should be able to buy stake in it and make the temple richer. The richer it becomes with the public trading it, the more it will it will do for the society, schools, hospital, roads, orphanage, housing. The list goes on. The more it does for the society, the more it will garner donations, which with temple being publicly listed, the ready excuses of the government that who will control the temple after we relinquish control becomes untenable. That the government tax the temple's wealth, no issue with that. At least the wealth generated by the temple will belong to the temple. At least then the Hindu will not be so blatantly discriminated in their own country. Okay, that is interesting. But just wait. You have to see, is it okay? Why is it that only temples are under state control and not the mosque and church? Hindu temples are state control due to colonial era lost and the absence of centralized Hindu authority. Okay. Hindu temples are state controlled due to colonial era lost and absence of centralized Hindu authority. Conversely, mosques and churches operate independently under their own community laws, regulated by the Work Act or independent trust structures to avoid the state interference in the minority religions. Historical and colonial legacy. During the British colonial government took over the administrations of many large, wealthy Hindu temples to manage the vast land and endowments and revenue. Okay, what is the exact definitions of endowments? ENDU. Endowment is the money that somebody gives to a school, college, or another institution. The act of giving this money. Endowment. Okay. Vast lands, endowments, and revenues. When India gained independence, these administrative responsibilities were transferred to the state government through the various Hindu religions and charitable endowments. Okay. Hindu religion, HRNC, right? Hindu religion and charitable endowments act rather than being returned to private trust. Lack of centralized authority. Unlike churches or the Hinduism does not have a central governing body or a single hierarchical structure. Historically, local kings and community leaders manage temples because the state was but there is no unified institutional leadership to handle it. Okay, management of the mosque and Islamic shrines are administered by the central work councils and respective state work boards. These are statutory bodies managed by the Muslim non-governmental department taking over the state controls. Okay, churches are mostly self-governing. Okay. Constitutional protections. India's constitution guarantee freedom of religions and the right of every religious denomination to manage its own affairs, while the government uses state-specific endowments act to regulate temple, exciting public interest and prevention of the financial management minority. Okay. Is any party or current government planning or introducing to make Hindu temples independent of state affairs? It should be, right? And okay, it says that yes, the movement to free Hindu temple from the state control has strong support from the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, several states level leaders, and prominent socio-religious organizations. While no blanket central legislation has been enacted yet, major political and legal shifts are actively taking place. The current situation is unfolding across the several pillars. Central government opposition to permanent state control. In the significant legal developments are before aligned with the central government explicitly informed the Supreme Court of India that it does not support permanent government control over the Hindu temples, distinction and governance. The center argued that while the state can legally monitor the secular administration and the financial management, religious practices, ritual, and day-to-day operation must remain entirely independent of the government interference. Political party promises and manifesto commitment. The BJP has regularly championed temple autonomy, primarily targeting opposition ruled southern states where government manages vast temple assets. State-level pledges in the form of various temple assembly elections such as the Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. The BJP has formally promised to introduce a law granting full administration autonomy to devotees and religious schools. Pressure from the religion units. State BJP leaders in the places like Punjab and Maharashtra has persistently demanded that the state government withdraw their control and hand properties back to the local Hindu trust. Pressure from the socio-religious organization. Massive momentum is generated by the organization like the Vishwa Hindu Prasad, the Free Temple Campaign. This one launched structured nation and the campaign to catalyze from the reforms. Legal intervention. The final resolution of this issue is heavily tied to the judiciary rather than purely legislation actions. The Supreme Court battle. The Supreme Court is reviewing multiple petitions challenging the constitutional validity of state-specific endowment tax. A definitive verdict from the court could fundamentally alter or dismantle current laws resistance, while nationwide rolling out free all temples hasn't stopped overnight. The political intent. Okay, so is there any judgment or ruling from Supreme Court, or Supreme Court is sleeping? The Supreme Court of India has not yet delivered a single final verdict freeing all Hindu temples, but it has issued a landmark ruling restricting government overreach and is currently hearing a massive constitutional challenge on this exact issue. The legal battle landscape is divided into past landmark precedents and critical active constitutional challenges. The case resurrected. The Supreme Court officially revived a 13-year-old batch of landmark petitions. Swami Dayadnath, this one, State of Tamil. What happened in April 2025, the court had initially dismissed the case, telling the petitioner to go to individual state high courts. However, the Supreme Court reversed its own decision, agreed to hear the challenge directs on its merit, and the scheduled final consolidated argument to begin on July 2024. The objectives of this case directly challenge the constitutional validity of Hindu religions and charitable endowments, acts in Hindu response. Okay. A final verdict could dismantle or fundamentally alter the state control over the temples. 2014, Chiddam Baram Nataraj temple, this one's past president, the most significant shield against Hindu, this one's limited takeover only. The Supreme Court ruled that the government cannot take over the administrations of the temple indefinitely. The evil remedied rule. The court had ruled that the state can only step in if there is a clear proof of financial mismanagement or maladministrations. Crucially, the takeover must be a limited time period. Once the issue that evil is resolved, the management must hand back this one's secular versus religious distinction. Reading back to the foundational Shirur Mut says the Supreme Court established a strictly boundary that it continues to uphold. Secular is a fair game. The state has the constitutional right to regulate the secular aspect of the temple, such as auditing, finances, managing lands, and public heavily. Religious is off the limit. The state is strictly forbidden from interfering in essential religious practices, ritual, or principle. The Supreme Court existing stance is that the state control must be temporary, corrective, and restricted only to the finances, because state government have bypassed this by keeping temples under the permanent control for decades. The apex court's upcoming consolidations. Okay, and so can state government use the revenue from temple to give freebies? Who knows? No, the state government cannot legally use temple revenue to fund general political freebies or government welfare schemes. The judiciary has explicitly and repeatedly ruled that temple money belongs strictly to the deity and cannot be treated as a general state revenue. The legal status of the deity in Indian law. Okay, this is I find interesting. Right? In Indian law, the deity of a temple is recognized as a juristic person. So under Indian constitutional law, the Hindu deity of a temple is recognized as a juristic person, a legal entity, and treated similar to the minor. The sacred trust, okay, it is treated similar to minor. That means they cannot disband. It has to be done. Okay, so all the contracts are taken. The guardian, so guardian is basically the people who are in the board. Sacred trust, money or property donated to the temple belongs solely to the deity. State role as a trustee is when the state government takes administrative control of the temple. It acts strictly as a trustee or custodian. It does not own the money, using a minor or deity wealth to fund this funds. Okay, criminal breach of trust. Strict judgment is judgment prohibiting division. The Supreme Court stands. The Supreme Court firmly reiterated the temple funds belong exclusively to the deity. This one, the court ruled that okay. High Court orders. The Himachal Pradesh High Court delivered a landmark ruling explicitly stating the temple revenue cannot be treated as general revenue for this. Okay, exchequer and cannot be evaluated as to ruling. Okay, how surplus funds are actually allowed to be used. States in laws like the HR and CE, Hindu. Okay, just where was I? Hindu religion. Okay, Hindu religious and charitable endowments. Okay, Hindu religion and charitable endowments. Okay. The core safeguards goes to this one, and state laws like the HR and CE, that means Hindu religions and charitable endowments, do allow for the utilization of surplus temple funds, but only for specific legally defined religious and charitable purposes tied to Hindu community welfare. Commonwealth funds, surplus money from wealthy temples can be redirected to maintain small financially struggling temple. Fund can be used to run Veda Pachalas, religious schools, Hindu universities, okay, dharamsalas. Dharamshalas, to orphanage and hospital for pilgrimage, disaster relief. Temple can donate directly to disaster relief in the spirit of Dharma. Okay, the core safeguards. Every rupee collected by the state controlled temple is subject to strict statutory audits, while the political rumors often claim that temple money is being used by the states to fund general free peace or other religious communities doing so is highly illegal under the Indian Constitution. Okay. Second, injustice towards Kashmiri Hindus. Terrorists are targeting Hindu settle in Kashmiri. Terrorists are targeting Hindu settle in Kashmiri, but not the Hindu visiting Kashmiris. Tourist footfall in Kashmir this past year has been the highest ever, a staggering 16 million. The businesses is booming, registers are ringing, tourists are safe. They want the Hindus to flee but then return later as a tourist. They want the Hindus to flee but then return later as a tourist. They want the Hindus to come as a tourist and fill their coffers but not settle in their own land. As Sushil Pandit, a Kashmiri Hindu and himself a victims of ethnic cleansing, says, tourism in Kashmir funds jihad. The Hindus are funding their own demise. How on earth can we watch this unfold and not do anything about it? What kind of a country is this where one can settle 500, 5,000 Rohingya Muslims? Rohingya, that's okay. So Rohingya, okay. I think it's mostly Muslim from Rohingya, Bangladesh, if I'm not wrong. Rohingya Muslims are from Rohingya, right? The Rohingya Muslims people are originating from the Rakhine state, formerly known as the Akran, Ogi and Myanmar. Despite having centuries-old history in the regions, they are stateless ethnic minority who are denied official recognition as citizens in Myanmar due to decades of severe persecutions and military character. The majority of the Rohingya population now lives as a refugee, primarily residing in the camps in neighboring Bangladesh. You can learn more about Rohingya. Okay. Jammu and Kashmir. Okay, where was I? The Hindus are funding their own demises, okay. And what kind of a country is this where one can settle 5,700 Rohingya Muslims in Jammu and Kashmir, but not 7 lakh Kashmiri Hindus? The original inhabitants of the lands. There is no other way of saying it. We live in a nation of broken mirrors, where you possess in neither a shadow nor a reflection. If you're a Kashmiri Hindu, you live in a nation that waits for death to rid us of our remembrance. So please wait a little more, just a little. 30 years have gone, but we haven't progressed from those ugly, inhospitable transit camps that taught the Kashmiri landscape at Sheikh Pora, Natsuna, Vinan, Visu, Matan, and Hall in Anand Nak's Vesu transit camp. Kashmiri Hindus who went to the flee because of their fear for their lives are being kept locked up. They cannot even step out to buy essential like the milk and medicines. Is this the kind of a freedom promised to the natives of the land? So while the Rohingyas enjoy unfettered movements in their near vicinity, according to the data from the Home Ministry, only 17% of the promised houses from the Kashmiri Hindus have been completed in the last 6 years. Only 5,928 Kashmiri Hindus have been appointed through the Prime Minister's job schemes. The numbers of the Kashmiri Hindu refugees is 700,000. A figure derived from the data provided by the Government of India Ministry of Home Affairs states the 62,000 families fled Kashmir in the aftermath of the Kashmiri Hindus genocide. A woeful underestimate, given that that this are government figures of the registered families tabulated to the provider relief and rehabilitations. To an extent, the Kashmiri files a recent film by Vivek Agnihotri has tried to reset the Kashmiri Hindus. Okay, Vivek Agnihotri has tried to reset the Kashmiri Hindus narratives, and that is why so many are rattled by it. Many prominent Kashmiri voices, politicians, intellectuals, writers, and poets of all those who stayed silent, even as the Kashmiri Hindu genocide unfolded right before their eyes, call for a ban on the films. To them, I ask: can there be any reconciliation without remembrance? Crime without compuned? Can there be death without deliverance? Can there be a justice without Nuremberg? Why do they have to hide the truths about the Nadi Mark massacre that the film truthfully depicts, where terrorist Zia Mustafa lined up 23 unsuspecting Kashmiri Hindus and shot them point blank, and as he was escaping, he heard a baby cry and his comrade goaded, Ye karna ye karna hun chupe, and then the baby became the 24th victim. Ye karna hun chupe. Why do they want to hide this? Why do they want to hide the truth about the Girija Tiko, who was raped and cleaved into by mechanical in a saw while she was still alive? Why do they want to hide the truth about the BKH Ganju, who hid inside a rice battle when jihadis came looking for him after his Muslim neighbors informed on him? Ganju was shot dead. Rice laced with his blood was fed to his wife. Why do they want to hide the truth about the slogans raised from the mosque on 19 Jan 1990? Relieve, Salive, and Ghalib. Convert, okay. Convert, relieve, run or die, okay. So convert, Salif, and Ghalib. Convert, run or die. the death to kafirs. Pandits go, but leave your women behind. Nizam-e Mustafa. Why do they want to hide all this? And what is the other side of the genocide that they demand should be also be shown? Yasin Malik, the assassin of the squadron leader Khanna, loved uh, Damalu. So Brita Karate, the killer of 42 Kashmiri Hindus, was the son of the shawl weaver. Zia Mustafa, the perpetrators of the Nadi Mark massacre, was the compounders at a hospital. I'll tell you why they want this truth to be hidden, because they realize that Kashmiri Files is not just a film; it is a Proustian collection of the memories of the Girija of Ganjos, of Dinanand, of tens of thousands of Kashmiri Hindus who were betrayed by their own friends, but they forgot they might have taken away from the Kashmiri Hindus their homes, but they can never take away from them their words, for their entrapments in a film may fool us into believing that they have physical form, in a form that can be destroyed when the film is destroyed. But the words existed much before their present state. Word never die. They always survive. In times of terror, we wrap them and hide them like our ancestor did, and it may take 30 or 300 or 3,000 years from them to be uttered against, but uttered again they will be, and when they are, the words will echo in the valleys of the violence where people only know how to light molotovs. These words will make them light diyas against. To be sure, I do not care about Islamists and politicians forgetting those words. What bothers me is that a government or judiciary, a society have forgotten them. How can these pillars of our democracy forget the cries of the Girija and the laments of the Dinanand? How, hearing them, those words, those haunting voices, on one feels lost for hope, wondering whether that in a fabled arc of your moral universe would ever pen towards justice for Kashmiri Hindus. Remember that 5 years ago, the Supreme Court rejected the reopening case of the criminal atrocities against Kashmiri Hindus because too much time has elapsed. You read it right. Justice is now weighed against times. Elapsed time is elapsed justice. Right? In December 2022, the Supreme Court reiterated its previous stance of not opening case of atrocities against the Kashmiri Hindus. It's not just the Supreme Court of India that is apathetic. It's apathetic. Pathetic, I know, but it's apathetic.
Apathetic.
Okay, it's not apathetic. It's apathetic. That's okay. Lacking interest or desire to act. Okay, pathetic means this apathetic. That's apathetic. That's apathetic means lacking interest or desire to act.
Apathetic.
Apathy. That's okay. Apathy. Okay. Apathetic. Apathy. Apathetic. That's okay. Apathy. Lack of interest, or the feeling of not feeling. Okay, show apathy.
Apathy.
The feeling of not being interested or enthusiastic. Okay, this one's apathy. And empathetic. Okay, apathy. Okay, apathetic. So apathetic. Apathy.
Apathy.
Apathetic.
Apathetic.
Okay. It's not just Supreme Court of India that is apathetic to the misery of the Kashmiri Hindus. The misery is compounded by the rubbing of salt on the wounds of the victims, by the appeasing and eulogizing, separatist leaders like the Shahid Shah Gilani, from journalists to politicians to judges to intellectuals. Anyone who has had anything to say or do about the Kashmiri problem has to break bread with this man, knowing fully well that he was equally responsible for the Kashmiri Hindu genocides and ethnic cleansing. He was feeded unceasingly while he was alive, and he is fondly remembered even in death. Gilani was responsible for pushing Kashmiri into religious fanaticisms, communal bigotry, genocide, Hindu exodus, and untold misery. A man is known and understood best by his own words. So let me quote the word of Gilani from his book, Nawa-e-Hurriyat. India is a bigger enemy of Islam. India is a bigger enemy of Islam and Muslims than even Israel. Muslims are wholly separate from the Hindus. The Muslims are a complete separate nations on the basis of religions, culture, civilization, customs, and practices, and thought. The nationalism and the foundation of their unity cannot be based on their homeland, race, language, color, or economic system. The basis of their unity is Islam and Islam alone. Pakistan was created for the hegemony of the Islam and for establishing an Islamic system. Pakistan is the land of the dreams of all the Kashmiri because it was born in the name of Islam. Accession to India would result in the Kashmiri Muslims have to live perpetually under the Hindu slavery. The entire struggle of the Kashmiri people is for the sake of Islam, stand for the accession of to the Pakistan. Kashmiri must become an Islamic state. Our goal is to establish of the Islamic governments. Our struggle is for the sake of Islam. Islam removes people from the slavery of the people, but secularism makes people slaves of Delhi. The ongoing struggle against India rule in Kashmir is not an ordinary war, but rather a jihad. I played with the Afghan Mujahideen. I plead with the Afghan Mujahideen to come forward to help liberate us from India, and by doing so express their bond of Islamic brotherhoods and religious commitment. If you don't want to be in India, then obviously you can go to some other party, right? Because the sole reason why you have a separate, Islamic country known as a Pakistan is because they don't want to be with the Hindu. And your parents, your grandparents, have decided to stay in India because they don't want to, because they love India and all those things, because of the, they know what they're getting into, right? You have to coexist with the Hindu, and Hindus are happy to have you. But if you say that we just want all the Muslims, then that's not going to happen. And you know that India is a secular country. I mean, in paper, so right. And secular means there's no, the country will run not based on your, the Sharia law or any of that thing, but it will be run on the constitutions. Everyone, even Hindus, even the Muslims, even the Sikhs, even the Buddhists. And why is there always a problem with the Muslim people? I don't know, man. Always. Look at the Buddhists. Look at the Christians. They do have a problem, but very rarely they do have a problem. But if it's a Muslim, there's always a problem. Always. Not even a single day pass by, there's no problem. And yeah, even the Hindus, they have some problems. Even they do have a problem. I mean, they have to also think about other religions, right? I agree with it. But Muslims altogether, they are on another level. In the light of the Quran, it has now become incumbent on the people of Pakistan to engage in jihad in Kashmir. In fact, participating in the Kashmiri jihad is now a binding duty incumbent not just on the Pakistan Muslims, but rather the entire worldwide Muslim ummah. This word of Gilani gives you a glimpse into this world, a world full of hatred for India and Hindus. I am very clear. If you eulogize him or more names, you can never be trusted. Your allegiance does not lie with India. Your allegiance does not lie with your own people, and who has been ethically cleansed and subjected to untold suffering and genocide. And when we speak of allegiance, we must not shirk away from the reality that every politician at the centers, be it from the Congress or the Janata Dal or the BJP, is flirted with those in the Kashmiri whose allegiance has always been suspected. Truth be told, Kashmiri has been turned into a snake and ladder games. The ladders are provided by the Pakistanis and the stakes by the Indians. I say Indians, but I wonder if these people think of themselves as Indians. Their first allegiance is to the religion. Yeah, that's the main problem. The main problem with the Muslim people, I'm not saying just Muslim, I'm talking about the majority of the Muslim people, are that they put first their own religion, then their nation. First comes nation, and then comes your state, your place, and then your religion and all those things. For them, the first will come the religion, and then comes the nations. That's not how it will work. Truth be told, the Kashmiri has always been turned into a snake. Okay, this one's, I say Indian, but I wonder. I say Indians, but I wonder if these people think of themselves as an Indians. Their first allegiance is to the religion, second to the Pakistans, third to China, and fourth to dynasty. It is a fact that Hyderabad could so easily have been what Kashmir is today, and fools in the media would be writing columns yet on the struggles. But for one man, Sardar Patel and Kashmiri could so easily have been what Hyderabad is today. But for two men, Nehru and Sheikh Abdullah, they set the board down for the snake ladders games, which their progenies have been playing ever since, making sure Kashmiri bubbling and ever-present communal bigotries, ethnic cleansings, terrorisms, and religious fanaticisms do not enter the Indian ideas. They talk of human and religious rights, but when have you heard them speak out on the atrocities committed by the Pakistan against the Ahmadiyas or the Baluts? Okay, leave aside the Hindu and the Christian minorities. Have you heard them speak out against China that has interned more than 1 million Uyghurs, Muslims, in a concentration camps and is feeding them pork? When have you heard them speak out against the brutal trampling of human rights of Ladakh? Lakhs of Dalits, Gorkhas, women, Sikhs, refugees, and homosexuals in Kashmir because of the Article 370s and 35A. But I will tell you, when they do speak out, when the powers and authority are threatened, like when Sheikh Abdullah spoke out and claimed self-determination was right, was his right, and countries they did not support it was their enemies. Or when Farooq Abdullah spoke out, and I quote, they want to abolish 370 and will remain silent. Inshallah, we will fight, but we dare them. So Allah would want them regain independence from India's land. When it comes to the Dynasty Miss Mehbooba Mufti, one would be hard-pressed to find a bigger hypocrite. From choosing a rape accused as an election candidate to threatening rivers of blood if Article 370 was abrogated, to shedding tears and mourning the death of Atreides Wani, to saying flags other than the tricolors will fly if Article 370 was abrogated, to threatening sedition by saying why would a Muslim majority still want to stay with India, to wanting 28 years punishment according to Sharia law, like death by stoning in Kashmir. Miss Mufti was scale the methane sweeping land field summits. For Kashmiri Hindus to expect any sympathy for help from such leaders and the governments is quite frankly self-defeating. Government come and go, and we shout and we make 100 excuses, but we can't get away from the fact that Kashmiri Hindus are in exile, as Salman Rushdie expressed so poignantly in these satanic verses. And exile is a dream of glorious return. It is an endless paradox, looking forward but always looking back. An exile is a ball hurled high in the air. He hangs there frozen in the time, translated in the photograph, denied motions, suspended impossibly above his native earth. He awaits the inevitable moment at which the photograph must begin to move and the earth reclaims its own. When will that photograph begin to move? Mind turns numb at the very thought that the nation is going about its business for 30 years while 500,000 Hindus have been reduced to refugee in their own hands. Is this what a so-called Hindu Rashtra is supposed to do for Hindus? We are the only country in the world that allows this across parties, across government, right or left or center. 3 years to 2019. Okay, just wait. Okay, I want to see when was this book written. Hindu in Hindu Rashtra. Okay, Hindu in. It was written in 2023. That means, okay, it is after the applications of Article 370. Okay, just wait. Okay, I want to see. Now in Kashmir, now in Jammu, okay, now in Jammu and Kashmir, can people, what is it called? Wave, okay, wave their old flag. I think you cannot now, right? People cannot waive the old, state flag of this ones following the applications of Article 370 in August. This one separation, the separate constitution and the distinct flag of the, region lost their official status. The Indian tricolor is now the official flag permitted in the regions. Another regulation waiving or hosting a defunct state flag or one associated with the prohibited or separate can attract legal actions. Okay, so I want to see their old flag. It's all red. Okay, I don't know. It looks weird. Every year on 19th January, Sri Utpal Kaul, a Kashmiri Hindu activist and father of a journalist, okay, Aditya Raj Kaul, brings out from underneath his mattress a crumbled piece of paper. It was a bus ticket with a date on it. So the date is 19 Jan 1990. Every year he does that, and every year Aditya shows it to me. And I have always wondered, what does it mean for the father to keep a ticket of 33-year-old? Is it to remind himself of that horrific journey of his clasping tight, his wife and a month-old Aditya being smuggled out in a jute bag while he sat lost, thinking of all that he had left behind? Was it to remind himself how he was counting every minute, passing miles his safety? Was it to remind himself of the blurred instance in the bus that contained within the image of the struggle ahead? Or was it to remind himself that he needed to be strong, that this was a cruel, unforgiving country, that his struggle were all his alone, and that he would have to fight them all by himself? Was that a bus ticket kept under his mattresses all this while? Did that bus tickets take the weight of this unbound sorrow every night of the every day of every month of every year since 19 Jan 1990? No. He kept it to remind himself that from now on, in his mind, that bus ticket was his adversary, and he shall look at him straight in the eyes and tell him that he was down but not out, that he was undefeated, and that he shall pick himself up and find work and educate his children and bring food to the table and greet every new day as he has did the last, and with a smile on his face, and that he shall be conquered. And on the appointed day on Jan 19th, when the father slips his hand under the mattresses and finds the bus ticket and hands it on to his son, he could almost have said, "Son, I pass this on to you now. It is yours. Now you take care of it, for it must be preserved for our future generations. They must never forget that a man's body may be forced to flee, but never his spirit. They must never forget who we are and where we came from. We are Kashmiri Hindus, son, and we stand today on our feet, and one day we shall take the journey back home. Time is running out. A refugee accepts his fate and the humiliation that comes along with it, and for him, he must worry about his new life. He forgets how to complain, and that it is a fatal mistake." Arundhati Roy, the totem of the left, once cushioned the crime of the Maoists by calling them Gandhis with the guns, while Kashmiri Hindus are the Gandhis without guns. And that is the singular reasons why no one cares for their plight, because this nation hears complaints through the battles of the gun, not the ink of a pen. This nation believes inaction is a medicine. It believes time heals. It believes wounds do not fester. It believes the exile never returns. This nation waits for death to raid its people for their remembrance. This nation wishes the Kashmiri Hindus all the happiness enjoying their afterlife. Kashmiri Hindus are the Jewish, but unfortunately, India is not Israel. They call Kashmir in the Switzerland of the East. Wrong. It is the Srebrenica of the East. What is remaining? And it will remain so still such time every Hindu is returned home. And I think if you want to be in a country, if you want to have a nice country, the first most important thing is to first look after the law and order, to ensure that if someone or some group or a society or a group of people or any people with an ideology, right, wrong, doesn't matter, left, right, east, west, doesn't matter. If they think that they can do some illegal activity, harm someone, destroy something of a public property, any of those things, and they can freely roam and not be questioned, not be arrested, not be uh, not be file a case on them, file a suit, and then they have to that they have to face the consequences, then they will roam freely. So they have to ensure, the government has to ensure that the law and order is their prime importance first of all, right? That no one, not even the official, the chief minister, prime minister, they not even them, right, all these people, they cannot expect that they'll do anything and then there will be no consequence. Now the third chapter, the Waqf Act 1995. Waqf is the third largest landowner in India after defense and railways, with much of its land holding rather amusingly pre-independence and endowments of the insidious give and take between the British and the Muslim they desired to pacify. Indeed, many of the Waqf landloadings go far as back as 1857. 77% of the Delhi is on Waqf lands, including the Delhi High Court's Central Vistas, which has recently been renovated and on whose hallowed turf new government buildings will shimmer and glisten, is on Waqf lands. CGO complex and Jawaharlal Nehru stadiums are on Waqf lands. Only three things are uncertain in Indian's life: death, taxes, and that knowingly or unknowingly he ends up walking every day on a work lands. Over time, many of this work properties were taken over by the governments, but then inexplicably, or perhaps not, one of the last decisions of the outgoing UPA government in 2014 was to gift 123 prime central Delhi properties to work and withdraw its claim on them. These prime real estate properties are from the prime time of independence and were endowed to the governments by departing British. Their status remained unchanged for 70 years until 5th March of 2014 when the departing Congress decided to endow them to the work. Even the Delhi High Court judge have opined that Waqf land is Allah's and Allah's own and that the government cannot cannot be the owner of this land. It is not just a government building that the work claims to be its property. Mukesh Ambani's house is on the Waqf lands. Okay, just wait. Okay, Mukesh Ambani properties. Is it on Waqf land? Whether Mukesh Ambani, Mumbai residents, until he is on the is a subject of an ongoing legal and political disputes, with allegation that the land originally belonged to the charitable trust managing an orphanage. Original ownership of the land previously housed the Karimboni, Ibrahim Koja. This one's an orphanage trust established by the wealthy donors. The allegation: political leaders in the Maharashtra State Board of Works have alleged the property was originally meant for charitable use and religious education that could not be legally sold for private uses. The transaction in 2002, the trust sold this 1 meters plot in South Mumbai to a commercial entity, which eventually facilitated the construction of the Ambani home family. Legal status: the legality of this sale has been challenged in court. The Maharashtra State Board of Works have previously submitted affidavit claiming the transaction was illicit, while the property has been transferred. Okay, now we'll talk about our Delhi. Okay, Delhi Central Vista. Okay, just wait. Okay, Central Vista. Central Vista. Central Vista Development Project. Okay, our Central Vista property under work. Several specific properties within the Central Vista area registered as this one. Properties that included mosque, shrine, and located key government compounds. Okay, located on this ones. Okay. Then do central government have to pay rent to the work. Okay, if the properties of the central government, this ones, then do they have central government have to pay the? No, the central government does not pay rent to the Delhi work provided for Central Vista properties. Legal status and financial realities, the nature of the properties. The specific site registered in the work within the Central Vista area, such as Zabta Ganj and this one work as active religious shrines and mosques, not commercial building leased to the state. Work management. These properties are managed by the respective local Muttabalist, managing trustees of the Delhi work property elected. The government does not occupy or use the actual religious spaces for its own office or operation, meaning no tenancy relationship exists. Ownership dispute. The broader land ownership of several central properties in this one has been heavily contested. Okay. Central Vista's project is actually designed to save the government money on rent. Previously, various central government ministries were scattered across Delhi, forcing the state to spend roughly this funds annually in rent to private landlords and country. Okay. The work board lays claim to 354,000 913 estates and 866,035 properties, comprising 800 and 2,000 acres of Indian lands, and with the UP having the highest share of 213,833 Sunni work properties and 15,380 Shia work properties. This data is from the work management systems of the India, whose motto, if you visit their website, is once work, always a work. Work, right? Work. Okay, work. One will, if they were to deep dig one work property, find that his grand noise motto is not the idea of or thinking of the work project or any of its members. It is in fact the verbatim. It is in fact the verbatim exclamations of the Supreme Court in its 1998 judgments, case number 4372, SRC 398, and the name of the honorable judge who said this iconic line, said Dr. Anand. Justice Dr. Anand, work essentially means that any donated property belongs to Allah in the perpetuity. Work decides any property adjured by Muslim law as a poised, religious, or charitable, and therefore fit to be labeled as work. In other words, work is inalienable and irrevocable. If you think this is a figment of my fertile imagination, let me quote directly from the work board's documents. Work is a voluntary, permanent, and irrevocable dedications of a portion of one's wealth in cash or kind to Allah. Once a work, it never gets gifted, inherited or sold. It belongs to Allah, and the corpus of the work always remains intact. The fruits of the work may be utilized for any Sharia complaints purposes. The work boards are, in case you were wondering, headed and constituted exclusively by the Muslim. If that was not discriminatory enough, let me run you through some sections of the Work Act 1995. Section 4 bestows on the Work Survey Commissioner the authority and the power like that of a civil court. Besides, the entire cost of the surveying is to be borne by the state. So, in essence, the Hindu property, once declared as work property, wholly arbitrarily will be surveyed by the work, and the cost incurred on a discount will be paid for that Hindu taxpayers, and people will okay, just wait. Section 4 bestows on the Work Surveys Commissioner the authority and power like that of a civil court. Besides, the entire cost of the surveying to be borne by the state. So, in essence, Hindu property once declared as a work property, wholly arbitrarily will be surveyed by the work, and the cost incurred on his account will be paid for that by the Hindu taxpayer, and the people say we are living in the fastest Hindu Rashtra. Section 40 gives the work power to decide if your land is work or not. In fact, if your property is claimed to by the work, it is your responsibility to disprove its claim, and still time you disprove it, it is a work land decision. If a property is a work property, the board may itself collect information regarding any property which is, it has reasons to believe to be work property, and if any question arises whether a particular property is work property or not, or whether a work is a Sunni work or a Shia work, it may, after making such inquiry as may deem fit, decide the questions. Decision of the board on the question under section this one shall, unless revoked or modified by the tribunal, be final. Where the board may has any reasons to believe that any property of any trust or society registered in the pursuance of the Indian Trust Act 1882, or under the Society Registration Act 1860, or under any other act is a work property, the board may, notwithstanding anything contained in such act, hold an inquiry in regard to such property, and if after such inquiry the board is satisfied with that such property is a work property, call upon the trust or society, as the case may be, either to register such property under this act as a work property, or assure causes why such property should not be so registered, provided that in such cases notice of the action proposed to be undertaken in this one shall be given to the authority to whom they trust to this one. The board shall, after duly considering such causes and as may be shown in the pursuance of the notice under this one, pass such an order as may be think fit, and order so mandate the work. Section 54 gives the work the power to declare you an encroacher, removal of the encroachment from the work property whenever the chief executive officer considers whether on receiving any complaint or his own motions that there has been encroachments or any land, building, space, or any other property which is work property and which has registered as such under the act. He shall cause to be served upon the encroachers and a notice specifying the particulars of the encroachments, and calling upon him to show such a notice before a date specified in such a notices as to why, an orders requiring him to remove the encroachments before the date so specified should not be made, and shall also send a copy of such notice to the concerned mutawalis. The notice referred to in subsection 1 shall be served in such a manner as may be prescribed. If, after considering the objections received during the period specified in the notice, and after conducting an inquiry in such a manner as may be prescribed, the chief executive officer is satisfied that the property in question is a work property, and that there has been an encroachment on any such work property, he may make an application of the tribunal for a grant of order of eviction after removing such encroachments, and deliver position of the lands, building, space, or other property encroachment upon the mutawalis of the work. The tribunal, upon receipt of such application from the chief executive officer for reasons recorded therein, make an order of eviction directing the work property shall be vacated by all the persons who may be in occupation thereof of any part thereof, and it causes a copy of the order to be fixed on the outer door or some other conspicuous part of the work property. provided that the tribunal may therefore, before making an order of eviction, give an opportunity of being heard to the person against whom the applications of the eviction has been made by the chief executive officer. If any person refuses or fails to comply with the order of eviction within 45 days from the date of a future authoritative under subsection, the chief executive officer or any other person duly authorized by him his behalf may evict that person from and take possession of the work property. So let me get this straight. The work decides in his wisdom that property is work property. It then serves as a notice to encroachers. Subsequently, it takes the matters to the work tribunal, and then tribunal decides on the nature of the said property and orders evictions. The terror continues paragraph after paragraph, section after section. Section 85 states, no suit or other legal proceeding shall lie in any civil court in respect of any disputes, questions, or other matters relating to work, any work property, or any other matters which is required by or under this act to be determined by a tribunal. In fact, even the Supreme Court declared in 2019 that a civil court of India has no jurisdictions in matters of the suit pertaining to a work property. Let me remind you of the ground reality. Work tribunal decision can only be overturned by a long and financially draining legal process. The work knows this in a country where 4 crore cases are pending. Harassment through legal procedures that stems from the inner offices upon all appeasing governments, executives, and judiciary is a sword that is sharper and more potent than Khalid's. How one may then ask, has the work Act 1995, that is the patently unfit to be applied to leave alone a mental asylum, has been applied to our nations of 1.3 billion people, assuming that the two are not one and the same? Remember, there's nothing in the act that safeguards the religious properties of Hindu being appropriated by the work. This itself violates not only the principle of natural justice but also multiple articles of our constitution, beginning from Article 14, 15, 20. BJP Infantorable Ashwini Kumar Upatia recently filed a petition in the Supreme Court challenging the validity of the Work Act. His plea was that the work board has Muslim MPs, MLAs, legislators, civil servants, lawyers, and scholars as its member, and they are remunerated by the taxpayer, even though the state does not collect money from the mosque. How is this secularism? The Supreme Court refuses to entertain the plea and threw it out. The judge called the petition abstract. The judge is now and will remain for the next many years the Chief Justice of India. Is he talking about the Chandrachud? The mayhem continues. Here is a section 28 that outlines the power of the district magistrate, additional district magistrate, and subdivisional magistrate to implement the directions of the work boards, subject to the provisions of this act and the rules made under the district magistrate or in his absence, an additional district magistrate or subdivisional magistrate of the district in the state shall be responsible for implementation of the decision of the board, which may be conveyed through the executive officers, and the board may, whether it considers necessary, seeks direction from the tribunal of the implementation of the decision. Then there's section 107. Now in law, there is something called the statute of limitations. That is the time period for acting on a dispute, filing a suit, or is set by the law. And this law is enacted through the Limitations Act 1963. But wait, section 707 states, Act 36 of the 1963 will not apply for recovery of work properties. Nothing contained in the Limitations Act 1963 shall apply to any suit for the possession of immovable property comprised in any work or for possessions of any interest in such property. What this means is that the work can lay claim to any and lay to and recover any property it wishes to without any have to worry about the passage of a time. The work, as you would have realized by now, is a parallel government wholly sanctioned by our own government. It has, through its overarching boards, its own legislature, through its surveyors and estates and compliance officer, its own executive, and through its tribunal, its own judiciary. And through this act, through this application, the message is sent to every citizen of the country. We are a special people. That message is all pervasive and uncompromising. It is the message that allows the Muslims and even rational, logical, and educated Muslims to claim that the Ganwapi mosque built atop the Grand Kashi Vishwanath temple is on the work land. So was the Grand Kashi Vishwanath temple demolished by the Aurangzeb, and as confirmed through this own certified biography, Masjid-e-Alamgiri also on work lands? Is this the message that allows Muslim to claim that the 1500 years old iconic Manindiyani, Chandrasekhar Swami temple in Tamil Nadu is on the work lands? I ask you, how can a 1500-year-old Hindu temple be adjourned by the work to be on Islamic land where Islam is only 1300-year-old? The more you read on work, the more you realize that the bulk of its muscles is flexed not only through the Draconian Work Act but also through letters that the former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi wrote during the emergency, ordering all the states to strictly obey her dictates. If the work properties she wrote have gone into adverse positions of the state governments departments, the work board could well start legal proceedings against the concerned departments, and where the costly buildings have been put up by the states on the work land and their vacation is not feasible, the state government may enter permanent leases with work boards after paying to the state boards the bulk of their market value as per premium. She further wrote that the work boards have sent government list of work properties in the possession of the government department. She urged to see that these are dealt with as suggested above. A periodic review should be undertaken and monthly reports to be sent to her. Work as ordained by the committee and as agreed by the center should be treated as differently from the individual landlords and therefore exempt from the Rent Controls Act. The work only asked the Congress to bend. The Congress decided to crawl. In fact, if the work only asked the Congress to bend, the Congress decided to crawl. In fact, during the dying days of the UPA, I think what is UPA government, right? Okay, just wait. They ruled for, I think, Congress. Okay. The United Progressive Alliances was a center-left political coalition in India led by the Indian National Congress. Okay, founded in 2004, it successfully governed the country for 2 consecutive terms. Okay, 2014, 2004, 2014. Okay, UPA, United Aggressive. Okay, UPA, United Progressive Alliances, United Progressive Alliances. NDA is equals to National. Okay, no. Alliances. National Democratic Alliances. Okay, the National Democratic Alliance is a major right-wing Indian political coalition led by the Bharatiya Janata Party, established by the right-wing political parties in India. BJP and right-wing political is one is primarily defined by the social conservative culture. This one's okay. Bharatiya. Okay, yeah. Bharatiya Janata Party, the predominant ruling party at the national level. The BJP is the electoral political arm of this one's okay. RSS goes to Rashtra. Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh. Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Shiv Sena, a regional party based on Maharashtra that places a strong emphasis on Hindutva and sons of the soils. Marathi Pride, the party, and ASD, a regional state level party in Punjab that focuses on protection. This one, and All India Anna Dravida Mudra Naga People Fronts. Okay. Through this tabled bill, not only was every order made by the work. Okay, just wait. The work only asked the Congress to bend. The Congress decided to crawl. In fact, during the dying days of the UPA, United Progressive Alliances, the work properties evictions of the unauthorized occupation bills 2014 was tabled in the Rajya Sabha, giving overarching and draconian power to the work eviction orders to demolish whatever it considered was an encroachments of the work property. Through this tabled bill, not only was every order made by the work state officer to be considered final, it could also be called into questioning in any original suit or application. No injunctions could be granted by any court against it, but thing did not just stop at injunction. The bill barred any Indian court to have jurisdictions to enter any suits concerning the eviction of any persons from any work property or demolitions of any structures or fixtures from any work property. Luckily for us encroachers of Allah's lands, the hard Congress went away in 2014 and was replaced by the soft Congress. Appeasement continues, if not through this draconian bill, at least in the interim through 1995 going. The Work Act 1995 is blatantly communal, discriminatory, unconstitutional, and draconian is not in contention. Only one made this clause in section to realize that what a rotten hand Hindu have been dealt with through this act. What adds to the absurdity is the fact that this is now a perpetual machine gobbling up lands, property, and government largesses with a speed and a still with every passing day is insatiable in its appetite, as though how to prove Dr. Ambedkar and his profound prophecy of Muslim under the divine obligations to convert Dar al-Dar to Dal al-Islams. This is no longer an arcane endowment that is a centuries old. It is an ever-growing mutant, having perfectly adapted to the appeasing and virtue signaling states. The work only asked the Congress to bend. The Congress decided to crawl. In fact, during the dying days, okay. Your special people and this one's okay, and Rent Control Acts. Virtue signaling states. Hindu who, during the partition, fled okay, what is now Pakistan and came to India. Their property was promptly, just Hindus who during the partition fled what is now Pakistan and came to India. Their property was promptly confiscated and either distributed to the Muslim citizenry or taken up by the government of Pakistan. Not so the case within the Muslim who from India went over to Pakistan. Their property was handed over to the work. As a result, the Hindu refugees who came to stay on this land are paying rent that is subject to arbitrary increases, and this injustice continues. The Hindus now must pay for work lands to celebrate the festival, as is what happened in Karnataka. However, government, both the center and the states, have usurped hundreds of thousands of acres of temples and lands and are responsible for more than 100,000 temples, losing lakhs of crores in rental incomes. There is no such act for Hindus. There is no such act for Sikhs. There is no such act for Christians. There is no such act even for Muslims in a Muslim majority countries like Turkey, Sudan, and Egypt. Welcome to the Islamic Republic of India. This is not our future. This is our present. The RTE Act, that is the right to educations. All religious schools are equal, but some are less equal than others. This paraphrasing of George Orwell's, parodic commandments, typifies the thinking of the state. Okay, just wait. The right to education. Okay, all religious schools are equal, but some are less equal than others. This paraphrasing of George Orwell's parodic commandments to typifies the thinking of the state when it comes to Hindu-run schools and education institutions. The Right to Education Act, or the RTE, is the power proverbial Moses staff that makes sure this commandment is to obey. The right to education in itself is a worthy undertaking that state as its preamble an act to provide for free and compulsory education to all the children of the age of 16 to 6 to 14 years. And but in terms of discriminations at once casual and concrete, very few act match up to the RTE. The act was first passed by the Congress-led UPA government back in 2009. Tellingly, it remains in force in the present-day Hindu Rashtra. Simply put, the RTE continues to destroy the Hindu schools and institutions. Perhaps this is the overarching goal of the secularisms, to allow the prospering of every other religions, its belief systems, its way of life, its cultural values, its educational methods, its wisdom, its book and scriptures, except Hinduism's. And after Hinduism is dead, we will remember it fondly and exalt its glory like we do for every other existing civilizations and culture. Taxidermy, fetish is what it is. There are numerous provisions under the RTE that selectively apply only to the non-minority schools. For example, you cannot have a capitation fee or screen student you wanted admitted. So the reimbursements of the fee by the government is never timely, forcing the school to go under the debt. There are numerous provisions under RT that selectively apply only to non-minority schools. For example, you cannot have a capitation fees or fee or screen students you want admitted. The reimbursements of the fee by the government is never timely, forcing the schools to go under debts. Even shop. You have to have a government mandate selection procedure for teachers, one that includes a quota-driven recruitment. There are several buildings and infrastructural instructions and requirement that a school must comply with. The list is endless, but the overarching draconian provisions of the RTE that is proving to be a death knell for privately run Hindu educational institution is its order that 25% of the seats must be allotted to children belonging to the economically weaker sections, or EWS, and other disadvantaged groups. This does not apply to minority schools. So the onus of serving the economically weaker sections of our society rests only on Hindu-run schools and not on Muslims or Christian-run institutions. In 2017, 3 years after the heralding of the Hindu Rashtra, the National Independent School Alliances (NISA) compiled a list of schools in 12 states that has been asked to shut down by the government for non-compliances to the RTE's draconian provisions. And as the RTE primarily applies to non-minority schools, one can safely assume that these were Hindu-run schools. As many as 7,000 schools in Maharashtra, the bastions of the Hindutva Swaraj, has been told us to shut down. We need to understand that the threat of the closure does not just intimidate the schools; it scares the pupils and the parents too. It has been 5 years since NISA implored the centers to relook at the RT and ease the draconian Hindu Rashtra scriptures. The Hindu Rashtra government is silenced now, as the famous line goes. जिसका कोई नहीं उसका तो खुदा है यारो, ये मैं नहीं कहता किताबों में लिखा है यारो. Which book, you may ask? Well, in a secular nations, we have only one book to fall back on. So let us look at the constitutions, because if discrimination is cast in stone, we must at least examine the stones. The stone to begin with is Article 30. I now quote verbatim. I now quote verbatim. Okay, all minorities, whether based on religion or language, shall have the right to establish and administer education institutions of their choice. 1A, in making any law providing for the compulsory acquisition of any property of an educational institution established and administered by a minority, referred to in clause 1, the state shall ensure that the amount fixed by or determined under the such law for the acquisition of such property is as would not restrict or abrogate the right to guarantee under the clause 2. Clause 2 is, the state shall not, in granting aid to education institution, discriminate against any educational institution on the ground that it is under management of the minority, whether based on religion or language. A direct fallout of not only the structures of the article but its words and compositions is that a Muslim in Kashmir, Sikhs in Punjab, and Christians in Nagaland are still considered minority. Muslim in Kashmir, Sikhs in Punjab, Christians in Nagaland are still considered minority and can run schools that will not be subject to RTE. In reality, these communities are a majority in their respective states. Let us look now at Article 23. The central and the state governments have discovered enough loopholes in it to violate this article at will to placate their vote bank. The article states as to 1. No religion instruction shall be provided to any educational institution wholly maintained out of the state funds. Number 2. Nothing in clause 1 shall apply to an education institution which is administered by the state but has been established under any endowments or trust which requires the religious instruction shall be imparted in such institutions. Number 3. No person attending any educational institution recognized by the state or receiving an Aid out of a state fund shall be required to take part in any religious instruction that may be imparted in such institutions, or to attend any religious worship that may be conducted in such an institution or in any premises attached thereto, unless such persons, or if a person is a minor, his guardians has given his consent thereto, cultural and education rights. Coupled with this, there is Article 26 of our Constitution that ordains freedom to manage religious affairs subject to the public order, morality, and health, and that every religious, denominations or by any sections thereof shall have the right to establish and maintain institutions for religious and charitable purposes, to manage its own affairs in the matters of religions, to own and acquire movable and immovable property, and to administer such a property in accordance with the laws. Read both articles side by side, and you realize what you are up against. Let me now read clause 5 of the Article 15 of our constitutions that was brought up by the UPA government in 2006 as the 93rd amendments. In Article 15 of the constitutions, after clause 4, the following clause shall be inserted, namely clause 5 equals to nothing in this article or in sub clause G of the clause 1 of Article 19 shall prevent the state from making any special provision by law for the advancement of any socially and educationally backward class of citizens, or for the scheduled caste or a scheduled tribe, insofar as such special provisions relate to their admissions to educational institutions, including private educational institutions, whether aided or unaided by the states, other than minority educational institution referred to in clause 1 of the Article 30. Now, Article 15 that prohibits discriminations on grounds of religions, race, caste, sex, or birth in a place of birth already had clause 4 that allowed states to make a special provisions for the advancements of any socially and educationally backward classes of citizens of the scheduled caste and the scheduled tribes. But it did not exclude minority institutions, and that puts the onus on minorities to also contribute to the society and work towards the upliftment of our socially and educationally backward classes of citizens, or for the scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. This was unacceptable to the Congress as well as, I must add, the present government, because this amendment was passed with the latter support. So I hope you can see it clearly now. The 93rd amendment is the staff meant to establish the commandments of Article 26 and 30, and it is because of the brain dishing of this. It could be brainwashing of the staff that the RTE does not apply to minority-run schools, bearing a ubiquitous exception of the ban on corporal punishment that all Indian schools must compulsorily follow. To summarize the chain of events, the government applies RTE rules selectively to the Hindu-run schools, orders them to maintain a 25% economically, backward states equals to this ones. Okay, society does not provide fee reimbursements on time. So much so that backward in 2019, as many as 4,000 schools threatened to go on a strike against the delays in the fee in reimbursements. Unconcerned, government threatened schools and blackmailed them with a client occupancy provision just to escape paying the reimbursement. Schools are forced to hike fees for all the pupils in order to escape debt and closures. The fee increases forces Hindu parents to shift their children to other schools. More and more Hindu parents take their children away from Hindu schools, and these children are now then welcomed by schools run by minorities and by virtue of the religion's obligations and directive principles of the Constitution laid down for the believers, where preaching, proselytization. Okay, proselytizations and conversions are religious duties. The students are inevitably, sometimes subtly, sometimes directly put under pressures to convert. Meanwhile, Hindu schools are forced to close down. A recent report estimates that the right to education is responsible for a closure of more than 10,000 Hindu-run schools. Proselytizations. I want to know the exact definition of proselytizations. Proselytizations. Okay. Proselytization. Okay. Proselytizations.
Proselytization.
Proselytization is the act of attempting to convert people from one religion, belief, or cause, to another. So while sometimes used broadly to describe recruiting for a political or social cause, it is only refers to religious, evangelism and aimed at gaining new followers. Is it forced? What is the meaning of proselytization? Okay, proselytization is the act or practice of attempting to convert someone from one religion, belief, or cause to another belief. It refers to the pervasive efforts used by the individual group to bring new people to the fold. Okay, proselytize. Okay, proselytize. Proselytism. Okay, proselytize. Okay, proselytize. Proselytize means to attempt to persuade. Okay, pronunciation. Is it illegal? Is proselytization, okay, is proselytize, okay, is proselytize, okay, what is, okay, as illegal? Proselytization, the act of attempting to convert someone to another religion or belief, is not universally illegal, but its legality varies to this one. In India, while the Constitution protects the rights to freely profess, practice, and propagate religions, forced or induced proselytization is illegal. Does proselytization, right? Okay. Does proselytization mean this one's okay. Converting mean, does this one mean converting by teaching about, teaching by teaching, or by bribing, by coercion? Could it be both or coercion? Could it be both? Broadly, proselytization means attempting to convert someone to your religion, cause, or belief. By a strict definition, it refers to converting by teaching and persuasions. Okay, however, the term has developed a negative connotations. Today, it is frequently used to describe converting by coercion, bribery, or forces, teaching and evangelisms. Okay, using dialogue. Using dialogue, preaching, and offering information to persuade them others to believe, accept, or believe. This is considered a fundamental rights to freedom of expression. Okay, this one's okay. Coercion, using threat. Okay, so evangelism is also promoting proselytizations. For example, many Christian organizations, including the Roman Catholic Church, draw a sharp line between the two: strictly condemning and proselytizing as coercive marketing, while actively promoting evangelism as a peaceful sharing of faith. Okay, evangelization. The storage revised and title, is almost full. Okay, so I got it. A 2017 CAG report noted that the release of funds by the centers to the school was sometimes delayed as much as 307 days. Such delays not only lead to outright closure of the schools, they also result in abandoning any plans for expansion or upgradations of infrastructure. Ironically, because these are the criteria to be fulfilled by schools under the RTE. More importantly, even if the government pays the EBS pupil fees, albeit a year late, the school would still have to shell out for textbook, uniforms, transport, and other ancillary things every school ongoing children needs, especially when his parents are underprivileged. The authority that decides if a school is exempt from RTE is the National Commission for Minority Education Institutions. Shockingly, this body, although quasi judicial in its directive, cannot have a Hindu as its member. In fact, BJP leader Ashwini Yudhava filed a PIL, public interest litigation, seeking to challenge the NCMEI Act and to allow Hindu to be declared as a minority in the state and union territories where they are minorities. There is a logical rationale, especially because it has wide-ranging repercussions on the survival of the Hindu-run school in the states and UTs. Hindus are now minority in Jammu and Kashmir, Mizoram, Arunachal Pradesh. Arunachal Pradesh, I think it's mostly Buddhist. Manipur, Punjab, Nagaland, Meghalaya, Ladakh, Lakshadweep. But one entity has opposed the petitions, calling it frivolous. No, that the entity was not the Congress or the Church or the Darul Ulums. That entity was the central government. The government had called this petition untenable and misconceived in law, and told the court that the petition was not in a larger public or national interest. They sent us back the same discriminatory National Commission for Minority Education Institution, under whose act only Muslims and Christian, Jains, Sikhs, Buddhists, and Parsis are listed as a minorities. But how is Muslim a minority? They have more than 200 million population, more than the population of the Pakistan. Ties the outrage. The present government has only now asked time from the court to think on the matters. Meanwhile, the Hindu-run religious and linguistic school continues to close under the burden of its discriminatory RTUs. If there's only one thing more cruel than allowing Hindu temples to run their own education institution without fear of a state interventions, and it is not allowing Hindus to run their own education institution without fear of a state intervention. If there is only one thing that more cruel than the fact that both these cruelties are being subjected on the Hindus, it is that they are being subjected by the Hindus belonging to Hindu governments in the Hindu Rashtra. Okay. Now we'll talk about the chapter number 5. Legislations that appeases non-Hindu but targets Hindu. Legislations, okay, that appeases non-Hindus but targets Hindus. In Hinduism, religion is an offshoot of the way of life. In Hinduism, religion is an offshoot of the way of life, while in Islam, way of life is an offshoot of religions. In Hinduism, religion is an offshoot of the way of life, while in Islam, a way of life is an offshoot of the religion. Because of this distinction, one is amenable to change and reform, while in others, leave alone reforms. Even changing a punctuation in the holy verses and commandments is expressly forbidden. And herein lies the dichotomy that plagues our states. We will try and reform one religion and its practices, but will recoil from reforming the others. We will break and remove the shackles of the intolerance from one, but will jaggle and rattle them with the pride for the others. We will constitutionalize the reforms in one to other through legislations, code bills, laws, and IPC sections, but it will not only stay away from bringing in similar legislation for the others. We will We will even overturn Supreme Court judgment that aim to bring in the limited reforms. Bigamy, for example, is a ban under the Indian laws, specifically under Section 494 of the Indian Penal Code, and causes carries a 7-year jail terms, but is permitted under Section 2 of the Muslim Personal. Bigamy. What is bigamy? Okay, bigamy. Personalization. BIGAMM. Bigamy meaning bigamy. Okay, the state of being married to two people at the same time.
Bigamy.
Bigamy. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying, right? In Muslim, you can marry up to 4.
Bigamy.
Bigamy. Okay, bigamy. Bigamy. Bigamy, for example, is banned under the Indian laws, specifically under Section this one, and carries a 7-year jail terms, but it permitted under Section 2 of the Muslim Personal Law, Shariat, Applications Act 1937. This is not to suggest the bigamy should be allowed for Hindus, but yeah, this does not mean that bigamy should be allowed for Hindus, but rather to highlight the double standards when it comes to Muslims. Another case is the point in the Preventions of the Communal and Targeted Violence, Access to Justice and Reparations Bill 2011, or the so-called Communal Violence Bill that was drafted by the Sonia Gandhi constituted and monitored NEC. Fortunately, it never saw the light of the day. If it had, it would have been yet another instrument of the discrimination against the Hindu majority community. That is because of the revised draft change the definition of the group targeted the communal violences. Henceforth, this group would have meant either a religious or linguistic minority or scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. This essentially meant that only the minorities and SCSTs could be victims, while the perpetrators of the communal violences would always be the majority, meaning Hindus. The absurdity of this bill dawned when people realized the Hindu would be branded as a perpetrators even when they were the minority. For example, in Kashmir, Punjab, Kerala, when STs were subtracted from the Hindu population. Outrageously, this definition was to be used even in the cases of sexual assaults. When Harsh Mander, one of the NAC members who drafted this ludicrous bill, was asked to explain reasons for such a blatant anti-Hindu sentiment, he retorted by saying, "There is an institutional biases against the minorities that needed to be corrected. In case of a communal violences, the entire criminal justice system has been set against minorities. It is to correct this institutional biases that we needed this bill. Someone should inform Mr. Mander that if at all the entire criminal justice system has been against a community in recent memory, it is against the Kashmiri Hindus who 30 years later are still seeking justice for the rape, murders, ethnic cleansing and genocide perpetrated against their community by the Muslims, their so-called minority. But according to this bill, these crimes could not have happened because the minority could not have committed them. Perhaps this is why the Supreme Court also refuses to open the cases of the atrocities. The truth is that the state has been blackmailed and beaten to such an extent that the so-called liberals, progressive and conscientious, feminist outrage on Karwa Chauth, but slither away under the favorite Partha Sartha, Rocky, when it comes to giving equal inheritance right to the Muslim women. This feminist will talk of anything but the fact that even courts in our country have begun to ratify the allowances for Muslim to marry on attainment of a puberty, violating the most sacrosanct of the law. Sacrosanct. Very sacred. That's sacrosanct. What is the exact pronunciation? Sacrosanct, right? Sacrosanct. Sacrosanct. Too important, special to be questions to or change. My cousins fly in from all over the world for our annually family reunion, which is a sacrosanct. What is the sacrosanct in one word? Sacrosanct describes something regarded as a holy, valuable, importance that it cannot be changed, questioned, or interfered with. It means immune to violation. Sacrosanct. Just wait. Even in court organizations are going to ratify the allowances for a Muslim to marry and attained of. Just wait. Okay. Is child marriage allowed in India with respect to Muslim? Child marriage is not allowed in India regardless of religion under the secular. This one's legal age is 18 for the female and 18 for the females and 21 for the male across all the communities, including Muslims. Okay. Violating the most sacrosanct of our laws, namely the Prohibition of a Child Marriage Act, and the High Court judge who okayed the marriage of the pubescent Muslim girl is now in the Supreme Court. He was one of the judges who blamed Nupur Sharma for the beheading of the tailor Kanyali Lal. They will claim banning triple talaq is an invasion of the privacy and an assault on one's freedom of expression. They will not castigate, OIC or his party for vehemently opposing the removal of leprosy as a ground of whatever. Because the AIMPLA believes that this is a party name, believes that leprosy, a disease completely curable, is sufficient grounds for divorce. They will not side with the Shah Banus. They will abuse anyone who pleaded for one India, one law. This is my belief, right? One India, one law should be there. I mean, it's not just the Muslims are compromising, it's also the fact that other Buddhist, Hindu, Sikh, they have to compromise to come together, right? They will abuse anyone who plead for this funds, okay? They will even applaud, Mehbooba Mufti, who recently called for introducing stoning as a punishment in Kashmir. This is the kind of in your space, space state sanctioned hypocrisy we are dealing with. Hindus and Hinduism stand no chance. When did they ever? For centuries, those who have ruled India have sought to bring in reforms only in Hinduism. The British even set up the B.N. Rao Committee in 1941 to exclusively codify only Hindu laws. The reports of this committee reformed the templates of the 1951 Hindu Code bills. This bill was adopted in 1956 and gives the credibility so much needed rights to the Hindu women, while at the same time providing equality to the affected parties at a range of civil matters, from succession of marriage to property rights to guardianships, to adoption and maintenance. Any reforms is good. It signifies helpful mutations are being accumulated that in the living breathing organisms is adapting to the changing times. It is also evolving, and because it is evolving, I mean, that is the thing with the Muslim, the Sharia law, is that it cannot be changed. But if you evolve, when you evolve with the scientific evolutions and all, you have to evolve also, right? You have to change those also. Not saying that everything has to be changed. You have to see which one is not irrelevant. If it's irrelevant and it's against the interest of the people, the normal people, the living who is living right now, then it has to be changed. By why should only Hindu and Hinduism be reformed? What about the Christians and Christianities, Muslims and Islams? Everyone is aware of the Dr. Ambedkar criticism of Hinduism as a religion and as a way of life. That the left loses no opportunity to highlight this in books, in debates, and documentaries, even in the parliament, but they remain silent when it comes to highlighting these criticisms of Islam. Indeed, Dr. Ambedkar was so appalled by selective criticism of Hinduism that he wrote, "The social evils that characterize the Hindu society have been well known, but books that exposes these evils and call the authors al bar of the world to answer for their sins create the unfortunate impression throughout the world that while Hindus are groveling in the mud of these social evils and are conservative, the Muslim in India are free from them as compared to the Hindus as progressive people. That such impression should prevail is surprising to those who know the Muslim society in India at a closer quarters. Take the caste system. Islam speaks of brotherhood. Everybody infers that Islam must be free from caste, but this is not the case. Yeah, so the thing is that in Islam, it says that there's no caste, but there is. Take the caste system. Islam speaks of brotherhoods. Everyone infers that Islam must be free from caste, but this is not the case. Caste among the Muslim has remained. There can thus be no more manner of doubt that the Muslim society in India is affected by the same social evil as affected by the Hindu society. Indeed, Muslims have all social evils of the Hindu and something more. That something is more is the compulsory system of the purda for the women Muslim. Okay, what is purda? P-U-R-D. Purda. Purda, okay, purda from the Persian Hindu Urdu word for screen or curtain is a socio-religious practice of sex segregations and female seclusion primarily observed in South Asia. It involves separating women from men and strangers through physical barriers like curtains and veils and concealing clothing like the burqa. Okay, it's called purta, I don't know. In 1975, a 62-year-old mother of 5, Shah Banu Begum, was thrown out of her house and onto the streets of Indore. She had been married for 43 years to Muhammad Ahmed Khan, who earned 5,000 a month, a princely sum in those days. 3 years later, destitute and without a roof over her head, Shah Banu approached the lower courts asking for a maintenance sum of 500 a month under Section 125 1A of the Code of Criminal Procedures. What she got instead was a talaq. In his defense, her husband told the court that he had already provided 3,000 as mayor or dowry during Idat, a period of waiting that a divorced woman must adhere to before she can remarry. The court sided with the wife and asked for the husband to pay a reduced maintenance sum of 25 per month. The husband refused, citing the rights given to him under the Muslim personal law. The case went to the High Court. This time, the husband was directed to pay a maintenance sum of 179.20 per month under Section 125. The husband appealed to the Supreme Court. In a landmark judgment, the Supreme Court dismissed Muhammad Ahmad's appeal and directed him to pay a maintenance to his ex-wife as laid down by the High Courts. Does the Muslim personal law, asked the court, impose no obligation upon the husband to provide for the maintenance of his divorced wife? Undoubtedly, the Muslim husband enjoys the privilege of being able to discard his wife whenever he chooses to do so, for reasons good, bad, or indifferent. Indeed, for no reasons at all. It is a matter of a deep regret that some of his interveners who supported the husband took up an extreme position by displaying an unwarranted zeal to defeat the right to the maintenance of a woman who are unable to maintain themselves. It is not clear. I mean, I think that I think inequality and all those things. If the woman is earning, then obviously, why do the husband have to provide it? But if the woman is, from the beginning and a housewife and all those things, then I think, yeah, it has to be distributed. It is not clear who among the bench penned the concluding words of the judgment. What is clear is that whoever they were are worthy of the praise. It is also a matter of the regret that Article 44 of our Constitution has remained a dead letter. The state shall endeavor to secure for the citizens a uniform civil code throughout the territory of India. A belief seems to have gained ground that it is for the Muslim community to take the lead in the matters of reforms of their personal laws. A common civil code will help the cause of the national integration by removing disparate loyalties to laws which have a conflicting ideologies. No community is likely to bell the cat by making a gratuitous concession on this issue. It is the state which has charged the duty of victory in securing a uniform civil code for the citizens of the country, and unquestionably it has the legislative competence to do so. A council in the case whispered somewhat audibly that legislative competence is one thing and the political courage to use that compete is quite another. So we'll understand. We understand the difficulties involved in bringing persons of a different faiths and persuasions on a common platforms, but a beginning has to be made. If the constitution is to have any meaning, inevitably the role of the reformers has to be assumed that the courts, and because if it is beyond the endurance of sensitive minds to allow injustice to be suffered when it is so palpable. To utter these words taking barely a minute, to write them down perhaps a little longer, but to think them through takes decades of learning and scholarship and have a degree of objectivity that demands detachments. And you have failed when it all comes to naught. Section 125 of the code concludes it is truly secular in character, whether the spouses are the Hindus or the Muslim Christians or passes pagans or heathens, or is wholly irrelevant to the application of these provisions. It would make no differences as to what religion is professed by the neglected five-child parent. That was the one blunder of our Supreme Court committed. Who or what is secular is not to be decided by the learned men and women of the highest court in the land. It is instead the sole prerogative of the politicians. Only have the sacrosanct, only they have the sacrosanct right to deliver this verdict. Exactly a year later, deliver their writs. The Rajiv Gandhi-led Congress government, beset with an issue of corruptions, nepotisms, and mismanagement, chooses the well-traveled route to political expediency and pass the Muslim Hindu, the Muslim Women Protection of the Right on Divorce Act. This one's one fell swoop. Okay, one fell swoop. One fell swoop, the Supreme Court judgment was overturned. The wording of the 1986 Act conveys to the citizens something the politicians thought they had overlooked, perhaps disregarded. Who rules whom? Every application by a divorced woman under Section 125 pending before a magistrate shall be disposed of by such magistrate in accordance with the provisions of this Act. Henceforth, the husband was to pay the ex-wife maintenance only during the Idat period. The liability beyond the Idat rested not only on the husband but on those relatives who would receive the ex-wife's property upon her death, failing which the work board was to take responsibility. Shah Banu was on the streets again, and India was back to being secular. Shah was on the streets again, and India was back to being secular.
Now, chapter number 6 is judiciary that almost exclusively tries to reform Hinduism. I repeat, judiciary that almost exclusively tries to reform Hinduism. On 1st of July 2022, the Supreme Court refuses to entertain a plea to club a multiple. Okay, on July 1st, 2020, the Supreme Court refuses to entertain a plea to club multiple, FIRs against Nupur Sharma for merely quoting what is derived from the revered in Islamic scriptures. Let me see Nupur Sharma. That it is a girl. Is born in. She comes from a village with a son and a businessman. Her mother is from Dehradun and studied in Mathura. Is she a political party? Okay. He is a faculty of law, University of Delhi Public School. Okay. Is an Indian politician. She was a national spokesperson of the Bharatiya Janata Party until this one. She frequently represented, BJP on television, debated as a official spokesperson. Okay. Uh, the Supreme Court refused to entertain a plea to club multiple FIRs against Nupur Sharma for merely quoting what is derived from the revered Islamic scriptures Sahih al-Bukhari 5134, Book 67, Hadith 70, and Sunan Nasai, this one's 3378, Volume 4, Book number 26, Hadith 3380. The court could have left it at that and dismissed the case and judges broken for lunch, but they did not. It is not for me to judge the judges, but let me quote them and leave them it for you to decide whether their remark against a helpless, victimized, shunned, discarded, hunted young Hindu woman were not bolstered by decades of institutional vilifications, ridicule, and discrimination against Hindus. Things do not happen in isolation. They build up existing, edifices, brick by punishing brick. You have ignited the whole country, and you have the cheek and courage to come to the court to ask for discretionary relief, cried the judges. You have ignited the whole country, and you have the cheek and courage to come to the court to ask for discretion and relief, cried the judges. You are single-handedly responsible for the burning in the country. Your statement is responsible for the unfortunate killing in the Udaipur, where a Hindu tailor was beheaded on camera for supporting Nupu Sharma. Are you facing a security threat, or have you become a threat to the security of the nation? You possess a loose tongue and keep on making irresponsible statements. You should apologize to the whole country for your remarks and made either for cheap publicity, political agenda, or some nefarious activities. Your petition shows your obstinate characters and your arrogance that you think that the magistrate court are too small for you. Sometimes power goes to your head, and people think they have backups and they can make any kind of a statement and go scot free. You went on channel and made irresponsible statements without even an inkling of the ramification and serious consequences, that how seriously it will disturb the fabric of the society. That the legislature discriminates against Hindus is not news. I provided enough examples. Plenty more exist of a minority appeasement at the cost of the majority. But what is to be done when the judiciary singles out the Hindus? What is the recourse then? What is the recourse is when you find that the fine lady who stands atop our temple of justice belligerent, when you find her sword that is pointing to the skies blunted and her blindfolded perforated, when you find her scales rusted, what is the recourse? There is none, because while the Supreme Court decides to remove discrimination from Islam, it is stooped it is stopped from doing so by the parliaments. When it decides to remove the perceived discrimination from Hinduism, it is encouraged to do so by the parliament. I talk here of the infamous 2018 Sabrimala verdict of the Supreme Court that went against the temple and its centuries-old tradition is dictated to keep its keepers by the celibate deity himself. Recall iconic statements of the dissenting judges in the original Sabrimala judgments. Nations of rationality. Okay. Notions of rationality cannot be invoked in matters of religions. Truer words were never spoken. Notions of rationality cannot be invoked in terms of religions. A truer words were never spoken. Is it up to Supreme Court to counsel and inform billions of believers that the holy Gangas could not have emanated from the trusts of Lord Shiva, or that the prophet could not travel to heaven on a winged horse, or that Jesus Christ could not have walked on water or turned water to wine? Yes, the court do not have a role to play in intervening and preventing oppressive and hurtful religious practices, but then again, what is hurtful to you or me may not be hurtful to the believer. For example, a belief that stipulating a dress code is oppressive, but can Supreme Court ban it? If it does, it would be violating the direct commandment of the Allah as revealed in Holy Quran. In the Holy Quran, 20, verse 24, 31, 33, 37, 26, would that be acceptable to the Muslim as well as to those liberals and feminists who cheered for the Sabrimala verdict that veto the discriminations? Was the discriminations or perceived discriminations to begin with? After all, there are many women temples, so Hindu temples, where men are buried in trees, such as the Kamakya temples, Brahmaji temples, Kumari Amman temples, Attukal Bhagwati temples, and Mata temples. And there are many Hindu temples, including many Lord Ayappa temples, where menstruating women are allowed entry. It is only in this particular Lord Ayappa shrine that, because of the vow of the deity to remain celibate, menstruating women in a particular age brackets are not allowed to enter. As for menstruating women, it is expressly forbidden for them to go touch the Quran, recite a complete verse, enters a mosque, do salah, perform tawaf, fast or have sex. So are we going to the redact these verses? There exists a fundamental contradiction between Article 21. Okay, that's what I'm saying. There's a contradictions between Article 21, right to life, dignity, and liberty, and 25, right to practice any religions of our Constitution. If one follows or respects one, it is impossible to follow or respect the others. This is because there are tens of thousands of religions, commandments, directives, decrees that directly contradict Article 21. If you are a true Catholic woman, you cannot be ordained as a priest. If you are a true Muslim woman, you cannot sing, dance, play sports, doing fornicates, to be a homosexual, wear what you want, or be an opposites. A progressive secular state that correctly removes discriminatory practices from the Hindu religions, but covers behind a lamppost like a wet cat when it comes to removing discriminatory practices from other religion is not a progressive secular state. It is a sacred state. The truth is that one would have to be an atheist to always override Article 25 and support Article 21. I'm being a Darwinian atheist. I'm fine with this. But are you, are the judges, are the politicians, are millions of my countrymen and women? That is the question. And until the time you answer it, why reform and tinker and restructure and amend on Hinduism while leaving other religion alone? Why bring in legislations and also judgments exclusively for the Hindu and Hinduism? In 2019, the Tripura High Court banned animal sacrifices, even though Hindu argued that this practice was a centuries-old tantric traditions of the worshipping the Tripura, banned animal sacrifices, even though Hindu argued that this practice was a centuries-old tantric traditions of the worshipping the 10
Mahavidyas, namely Kali, Tara, Tripura, Sundara, Bhaveshwari, Vaivara, Chinaswans, okay, Bangalaswans. Mutangi and Kamala, what the Hindu pleaded was also in keeping with the famous 1954 Shirur judgment, the establishment, the sanctity of an essential religious practices, but the judges could not hear none of it. No persons, including a state, shall be allowed to sacrifice any animals or birds within the precinct of any temple within the state of Tripura. They ruled in 2014, the judges of the Himachal Pradesh High Court had similarly banned the 600 years old traditions of an animal sacrifice during Kulu Daseras. In 2017, the quasi judicial NGT ordered a ban on the tolling of bells and the chanting of shoklas by devotees at Amarnath. Praise the Lord. They simultaneously did not allow the delivery of azans through a loudspeaker there, or perhaps they indeed did, but the vagaries of the states had meant the other is yet to reach Bolenath's board. The question is to be asked: why should only the religious as well as to Hindu be prevented from conducting animal sacrifices? If the state is against animal sacrifices and laudably so, laudably so, laudably so, then should not it be against all the animal sacrifices fine, sacrifices conducted in the name of religion? But is that the case? Is the honorable court object to the taking of the life of an animal through a religious rituals? Do they have the guts to ban halal every single day? Even more than a billion Muslims eat meat after these religious rituals have been performed. In fact, it is an essential requirement. The viva or the prescribed ritual slaughters must be staged. The incision must be precise and deep that cuts to the carotid artery and the trachea. The blood must be drained completely. This while the animal is still alive. The head of the animal must be aligned to the kappa, and it is essential that Bismillah Bismillah Rahman Rahim be uttered. Furthermore, only a Muslim can perform the slaughter. So, according to the honorable judge, why this is not a ritual. In fact, this ritualistic practice has been deemed so cruel in many European countries that it is mandatory to stun the animal before performing halal. But our judges have the courage to shun elect selectively when it comes to animal rights. Hindu festivals and celebrations and sporting events are easy targets, be it Jallikattu or Kambala or Naga Panchami or even kite flying during the Makar Sankaranti, or believe it or not, restricting the height of the the Handi during the Jamamashti festival. The judges have capped the human pyramid height to 20 feet, saying anything above would inflict harm to the participating humans. We only know of Krishna stealing butters. Did he also indulge in acrobatics while stealing and mock the judges? I want to ask the judge what happens to all the mockery and colorful reports when it comes to Muharram, where tens of thousands of Muslims openly inflict serious bodily harm to themselves and to others, while with a whip black with the laced with the steel claws that stab deep into the devotees' flesh and chants of the Ya Abbas. Is that not inflicting harms? But does our state or its have the guts to ban this ritual during Muharrams? It is the same with the banning crackers during Diwali, but allowing millions of tons of stubble to be burned during the same months, or millions of trees to be cut during Christmas, or allowing fireworks during the New Year celebrations, because apparently only Diwali is increasing the carbon footprint and contributing to the pollution. The rest are purifying the environments, and for those who blame Diwali for the state of Delhi air every year, here is some perspective. An area of 17,900 square kilometers, or 12 times the size of Delhi, is on fire continuously for weeks on end, right next to Delhi. 335 million tons of stubble are burned right under the noses of our judge. Honestly, I'm now convinced that the only way stubble burning can be banned is if we call it a Pareli Dahan, a Hindu festival wherein, according to that the Atharva Veda, Lord Vishnu burned demon king Paralisuura when he enslaved Marut and storm king Rudra. Only then when it was banned. Stubble burning releases 149 million tons of carbon dioxide, which is 55% of the all Indian transport carbon dioxide emissions. The financial burden of the treating the resulting in respiratory disease alone is 154 times more than the cost of the machine needed for stubble extraction. But if our politicians and judges thought like this, we could be a developed nations. And with our courts acting the way they are towards Hindus and their rituals, can the state be far behind? Dharmapurams, Adiyalams, Patina, Pravesams, the ancient Hindu rituals of the carrying the priest has now been banned, and that too by invoking clauses of the forced labors. You mean to tell me that devotees are being forced to carry the pontiff the river? What next? I will tell you what next. There will soon come a time when the state will ban the pulling of the Lord Jagannath on the pretext of the forced labor. But there will never come a time when the state bans Syria. Okay, just wait. Bans Syria would be violating the direct commandments of Allah as revealed in the Holy Quran. Would that be acceptable to Muslim as well as to those liberals and feminists who cheered the Sabarimala verdict that vetoed the discriminations? Was it discriminations or perceived discriminations? Okay, so he's mentioning this one a lot. Okay, what is perceived discrimination? uh, difference between discrimination and perceived discrimination. Perceived, I perceived it to be that way. Okay. Discrimination is the objective, unfair treatment of an individual based on a specific group characteristic. Perceived discrimination is the subjective interpretations of those experiences. It highlights that the psychological impact of biases often depends upon whether the victim believes their treatment was driven by the prejudices. The distinction between the definition. So discrimination is the actual, measurable, and unfair treatment of a person based on the trait like the race, gender, age, or disability. So perceived discrimination is the personal feeling or belief that one has been unfairly. Okay, perceived discrimination. That means you feel like you have been discriminated. That's not discrimination. Discrimination equals to the actual, measurable, and unfair treatment of a person based on the fair trait, based on the traits like the race, gender, age, or disability. Perceived discrimination, if personal feeling or belief that one has been fairly unfairly treated due to these traits. Evidence relies, first equals to discrimination, evidence equals to relies on concrete objective evidence, that is wage gaps, documented policy violations of witnesses. But in terms of perceived discrimination equals to evidence that relies on targets, individual interpretations, and feeling which may or may not align with the provable intent of the perpetrators. So this is equals to perceived interpretation discriminations. Nature is equals to discrimination, tangible, external. It happens in the physical world regardless of whether the victim realizes it. And if it's a perceived discrimination, it goes to psychological and internal. It captures how the victim processes and attribute the sites or unequal treatment they face. Impact, directly denies a person's right resources or opportunities. Discriminations, and in perceived discrimination, acts as a chronic and psychological stresses that can impair mental and physical health, regardless of whether the underlying discrimination can be legally proven. Okay. Uh, would that be acceptable to Muslim as well as to those liberals and feminists who cheered the Sabarmila with the veto the discriminations? What is the discrimination or perceived discrimination to begin with? After all, there are many Hindu temples to where men are buried in trees, such as the Kamakya temples, to this one Stokya temple. It is only this particular Lord, this one shrine, that because of the vow of the deity. Okay. Hmm. Why should only religious be prevented? Okay. But will never come a time when the state bans serious requests for traditions carrying Christian priests. There will, never come a time when the state bans the hoisting of the bulky azia on dozens of tired, exhausted shoulders during Muharrams. There will never come a time when the state bans traditions of carrying a heavy wooden cross on Easter, Easter parade. There will never come a time when the state bans male the genital circumcision, a religious ordained act of cruelty that is banned in many European countries. This selectivism against only Hindu festivals and religious practices will soon result in a scenario where the Hindu begins to dislike their own traditions. From there, the road to self-loathing is but a few yards away, and we know where the road leads to. Forsaking Hinduism itself and accepting another religion, as if one cues, the courts have recently opined that non-Hindu cannot be buried by temples and setting up their shops on temple premises. We cannot allow this. Thundered the bench. So let me get this straight. A man whose religion orders him to viscerally hate the Hindu, commands him to convert this infidels, and if he cannot, then kill him at an opportune time, in a moment. A man whose religion tells him that no one has the right to be worshipped but Allah, that those who deny the Quran, their neck will be shackled, that polytheists or Hindu are the worst of the creatures, that fight against those who do not believe in Allah and who do not adopt His sons, fight them until they give the jizya while they are humble, that do not marry polytheist women unless they believe in the sons. But those who believes in our verses will be, verses we will drag them into a fire. They do not take disbelievers as friends unless they convert and kill them. If they refuse, the court orders the Hindu temples to give this man the temple's owns land to set up a shop in this. Is there a final example of how entrenched snubbing of Hindu interest has become? There is no other way of saying this. The camel has begun to sneak into the tent and open sky awaits. Now we'll talk about the chapter number 7, celebrating those who killed and converted millions of Hindus. Celebrating those who killed and converted millions of Hindus. To visit Nalanda, the ancient place of learning and arguably India's greatest cultural heritage, one needs to board a train from Delhi and get down 50 miles from Patna at a place called Bhaktiyarpur. Bhaktiyarpur. From Bhaktiyarpur, it is a brief and pleasant journey to Nalanda. And when you reach this hallowed place, and for the record, I've been there. When you stroll around its manicured lawns and thin brick facades and ruins, you will get to know how this magnificent temple of knowledge and wisdom was charried to the grounds by the barbarian, how thousands of scholars perishes in the fire that burned for months, how millions of books were reduced to cinders, how a civilization the world envied and admired as a Vishwaguru was lost forever, and that the barbarian who executed this vicious act was none other than Bhaktiya. Yes, Bhaktiar, and we have named not only a railway station but also a city in his honors. Destruction has been that even Bhaktiar could not have managed in his lifetime is now complete. 1,000 years later, so that we have honored the barbarian is now hurtful enough. So was what hurt most is that because we were so unsatisfied with this hideous self-flagellation, so we have endeavored to descend a step further into the dungeons of distorted history and peddle the narrative that the Bhaktiar did not even destroy or set fire to Nalanda. Instead, we have blamed a couple of Hindu beggars for burning down the great city of Nalanda. That's right. Not an invader and his army of 30,000, but rather two gawky little Hindu beggars were responsible for destroying the greatest ancient university there was. Okay, let me fact check. Um, who destroyed the Nalanda University? Nalanda University was destroyed by the Turkic military general Bakhtiar Khilji around 1200 CE, Common Era. During his military campaigns in the northern India, his army ransacked the monastery, killed the monks, and burned its legendary library. Okay, 1,000 years later, we have honored this barbarian of 1,000 years. So he destroyed this at what time? He destroyed it because 1200. Right now it's okay. Yeah. Okay. I do not have an inclination to narrate you for you in detail the figments of the leftist historian, D.N. Jha's mind and its imagining. The fact that he never quote a primary source for his assertion, the fact that the first English translation of Jha's source, Pak Sam John Sung, was carried out as late as 100 years after ago, the fact that it has never mentioned the two Hindu beggars, but the fact remains the Jha has won its war of narratives. Bhaktiar lives. For the sake of Islam, I became a wanderer. I battled infidels and the Hindus. I was determined to become a martyr. Thanks be to Allah, I became a Ghazi. This is a direct quote of Babur from Babur Namas. There is a Babur Road in central Delhi, barely a mile from the Prime Minister's residence. Babur lives. Hindu gods and their idols are as dirty as they are ugly and horrible to look at. And witnessing destruction of a temple idols gives me so much joy. The man who said this was also the chief proponent of the Goa Inquisition that led to the conversations, tortures, conversion tortures, and even and murder of thousands of Hindus. His name was Saint Francis Xavier. Every year, millions of Indians, including our Hindu nationalist Prime Minister Modi, venerate him. Saint Francis Xavier's life. Sikandar Shah Miri, who commissioned Jamai Masjid and still eulogized. And Kashmir collected 3 kilobas or 210 kilograms of sacred thread from the Kashmiri Hindus before he burned them. A single sacred thread weighs 7 grams. I shall leave it to the mathematicians among you to calculate the sheer scale of the genocides. Sikandar Shah merely lives. I will raise this Anasagar Hindu temple to the grounds. I have come to India to fight the holy war against the infidels. The man who said this was Wajai Moinuddin Chishtu, the Hanafi Sufi saints who fought alongside the demonic Muhammad in Ghurei and unsparingly converted Hindus every year. Millions of Indians, including our Hindu nationalist Prime Minister Narendra Modi, offer a chadar at his mazar and venerate him. Moinuddin's Christy lives. We know more about the Mughals and about Shivaji, Rana Pratap, and Prithvi Raj Chauhan. Why? Because history that is written by the history is okay. Victors is battled by the vanquished, and we have been vanquished. This is a country where people still go and pray at the grave of Aurangzeb, who beheaded Guru Tegh Bahadur, decapitated Sambhaji, Maharaj, demolished Kashi Vishwanath, and murdered 4.6 million Hindus. This is a country where Guru Arjan Dev was forced to sit on a hot plate and literally cooked alive by the Mughal Emperor Jahangir. And what do we do? We immortalize films as the five-people feather towing romantic Salim. This is a country where celebrated historian Ramchandra Kaur, who did not wanting to in Delhi roads to be named after Chhatrapati Shivaji, the man who birthed an empire stretching from Peshawar to Plassey, because in Guha's word, he was a little known regional figure and a feudal lord who endorses caste hierarchies. This is a country where we eulogize the invaders who, for many centuries, perpetrated the largest genocide in human history and murdered 80 millions of us. A figure cited authoritatively by historian K.S. Khan, Scandal Durance. This is a country where Kareena Kapoor and Saif Ali Khan take pride in naming their son Taimur, where Akhilesh Yadav takes pride in having the nickname Tipu. Our history has been written by those who hated Hindus. Hinduism and Hinduism. Our history is being written by those who hate Hindus. Hinduism and Hinduism. There are hundreds of examples, but just one would suffice. Tipu Sultan. Read his manifestos written in his own words. It is a terrifying proclamation calling for all Muslims to come together to wage a jihad. Annihilations of the infidels is a sacred duty. He writes, the Hindus of Kur suffered a particularly brutal onslaught, murders, tortures, forced conversions. Even dead Hindus were converted. Even Mysore is known for Tipu Sultan, right? Okay, that's right. Uh, is Mysore palace of Tipu Sultan? No, the magnificent piece, okay, Mysore, okay, palace was not built by Tipu Sultan. It's the official residence and seat of Wadiyar dynasty, the royal family of Mysore. And Tipu Sultan is the ruler, okay, Tipu became the ruler of Mysore upon his father's death from the cancer in 1852, and from the second Anglo Mysore belongs to Tipu Sultan. What is the continuation between Tipu Sultan and Mysore? Tipu Sultan took his instance with the ruler of the South Indian state of Mysore, where he built a sophisticated and modern force around his place at Srirangapattam. Tipu spent much of his reign engaged in hostilities against the British. Who's the real owner of Mysore Palace? The government of Karnataka and the Vaidesh royal family, okay? Okay, and history has been written by those who hated, Hindus, okay? And issue is this one. The Hindus of Kur suffered, okay? Tipu destroyed more than 800 temples, 27 churches, captured 60,000 Christians, captured 60,000 Christians, converted 30,000 and killed thousands. Chroniclers Lewis Rice and R.D. Palsokar believe the figures could be as high as 8,000 temples. The descendants of Mandyam's Iyengars did not celebrate Diwali till this day. Ever wondered why people butchered them on this day? Read Balumuyi's personal accounts of the Tipu Sultan's butchery in Calicut. Men, women, and children were paraded naked and trampled by the elephants, and yet we call Tipu Sultan a symbol of the communal harmony. We cheer when the statue of the evil racist king Leopold is demolished in Belgium, and we celebrate Tipu Jayanti because tyrants who murders Hindus are not tyrants but heroes. Praising Tipu is like praising King Leopold for the building roads and ports in Congo, balancing out ivory and rubber trade, and a million wonders. There's no differences between Tipu Sultan apologist and Holocaust denier, and yet they exist in their millions. In a year to come, I am sure Yaqub Memons grave would become as popular as a worshipping place as Aurangzeb is today, visited and prayed by politicians and film stars. The same Aurangzeb who was Baghdadi is 350 years before his eyes. The genocide has he perpetrated claimed 4.6 million Hindu lives. If an incident could muster a million spine chilling, imagining it would be that of one of 1675 under the broad daylight in Chandichok, where Guru Tegh Bahadur was beheaded on the orders of the Aurangzeb. And yet we have cities and name brought up to him. We have his tomb consecrated, okay? Consecrated and turned into a memorial. 75 years have gone, but we still have not got independence from brainwashing and servitudes. And that is why in years to come, Yakun Menon would be celebrated like Aurangzeb is, and after tens of thousands attended his funerals, tears flowing down the cheeks. People will come and pray at his grave, seeks blessing for the Aryans to Aurangzeb. From St. Xavier's to Shivaji, a historian have chosen what to hide, what to invent, and what to disclose. The singular reasons for this is the craving of patronage, of an ideology, a government, and ecosystem of belief. Villains are made into heroes, and heroes into villains. We like this. We like it this way. Our historical figures also are to be worshipped. They are to be made into gods, into Atlases who carry the weight of our ideologies and our vices on the next. History as a myth as history. It conforms to what we really are, unsure of our presence and fearful of our futures. For fear and trembling, that is what this is, and the whole nation chucks down on this dead we get swimming a journey to nowhere, so halting and trying until you realize what the grand plan is always is. To appropriate invaders and to forget our homes. How else do we explain appropriating foreign destructive ideologies and the proponents of the Karl Marx, Mao, Shares? Can we now appreciate or reading and imbibing a particular history can weaken a nation. Because when you eulogize monsters like Cheo, Mao, or Clost, you also decide to walk into the past. You weaken the nations. You look at what the communists did to Bengal. Look at what they did to anything they have touched, and they still venerate Stalin and Mao. Mao, who killed 63 millions of his own people. And if you think I am talking abstract and philosophical gibberish, recall who wanted to shuttle the Indo-US nuclear deals, who was against the Green Revolution, against river linking, against Titans. Recall who forbade the setting up of a blood donation camps during the 1962 war with the China. Recall who hailed the Tiananmen Square massacre. Recall who was against liberalizations. They are still very much amongst us in our society, in our committee, in our university, in our parliaments. The more we ignore about history, the more we are taught of it wrongly. The more we clear the path for them to return to some powers. History for us is either to be hidden or invented. So we retell, and what we like it breaks, and then what we do not scrunch it up and slip it under the mattresses, brush it up under the market, okay, brush it under the carpet. For the victors, a quill to write history with, for the vanquished, the burden to paddle with. But we forgot history is not homeopathy. It does not work as a placebo when diluted. It simply disappears. Every city a Hindu lives in, every school he attends, every university he goes into, every road he walks on, he cannot escape being confronted by his cruel past that raped, mutilated, murdered, converted him. He cannot escape being humiliated by it, plummeted again and again by against by the force of the history, condensed and packed into a punch that lands and lands and keeps on landing until the Hindu is lying face down on the canvases, blood laced, spittle bubbling from his lips. This is a Hindu Rashtra. They say, I ask them, is there a Hitler road in the Tel Aviv? I ask them, is there a Hitler road in Tel Aviv? Yeah, that's a very fair question.
Now, chapter number 8, Places of Worship Act 1991. Places of Worship Act 1991. History that is written by the victors. I had remarked earlier is peddled by the vanquished, and as far as I'm concerned, one of the most barbaric legislations ever peddled in India is 1991 Places of Worship Act. But in 2019, the virtue signaling Supreme Court in its Ayodhya judgment willfully ratified this act that obligates maintaining all religious places except Ram Janambhumi willfully ratified this act that obligates maintaining all religious places except Ram Janambhumi as they were on 15th August 1947, a 75 years old dated in 8,000 years of civilization. Historical injustice of Kashi or Mathura can now and never be addressed unless the parliament overrides not only this barbaric act but also the Supreme Court's perfidious ratification of it. A legal recourse, it's to correct historical injustices cannot be denied in the democracy, and this is not a Hindu issue. I, as a Darwinian atheist, demand the abrogations of the Places of the Worship Act. If a mosque had been demolished by the Hindu king and a temple built on it, I, a kafir and an atheist for whom Islam sanctioned death penalty, would have fought for the right of the Muslim to legally get back their mosque. History is a collection of images, pregnant, expecting, screaming, and if an image could deliver a million words, it could be that of a Nandi waiting patiently for 400 years of its slot to emerge. Will he have to wait for another 400 years? Nation weaken not because of their past, but rather by how they are taught. For 70 years, we have been taught to celebrate Mathura, Eidgah, and the Ganwapi Mosque as a monuments to Hindu-Muslim unity and not as what they really are, cruel historical injustices. Because for 70 years, we have been taught to forget cruel historical injustices from Somnath to Kashi Vishwanath, Barbarpur to Bhaktiyapur, from Allahabad to Aurangabad. These injustices have been deliberately made visible as to lionize the debasements, celebrate the humiliation, and the irony is that the same people who have taught us this and drill this self-loathing to us, the same people want others to fight historical injustices around the world. They condemn barbarian of the West hitherto worship like the Confederacy General, Rhodes, Churchill, Pizarro, Murray, Colston's, Leopold. They celebrate the roads and building being renamed, their statues being brought down illegally. But here in India, the same set eulogies barbarian like Tipu, Aurangzeb, Barbar, Khechli. They celebrate the destruction of Kashi, Mathura, Ayodhya, Martland. It is a heady mix of hatred for Hinduism and love for jihadism, hatred for India and love for its breakup. To show you the extent of the conceit, here is a passage from the 2019 Ayodhya judgment, where the honorable judges excolled and willfully ratify this judge. This to create the imagery of what those who sat that sultry day in the court and heard these words uttered by the highest court in the land. I will provide after every sentence phonetic equivalents of whips lashing one's back in a self flagellating orgy of equivalence, okay, of destructions and humiliation. Places of Worship Act imposes a bar on the institutions of a fresh, suits or legal proceeding, with the only exceptions, other than Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi case, being appeals or proceedings pending at the commencement of the law on the grounds that conversions of a place of the worship had taken place after 15th August 1949. Wush Thwak, the places of worship act is thus a legislative intervention which preserves non-retrogressions and as an essential features of our secular values, being as it is intrinsically related to the obligation of a secular state. Wall of Smack, it reflects the commitment of India to equality to all religions, to which thumb. Above all, the Places of Worship Act is an affirmation of the solemn duty which cast upon the state to preserve and protect the equality of all faiths as an essential constitutional value, a norm which has a statute of being a basic features of the Constitution's wax slap. There's a purpose underlying the enactment of the Places of Worship Act, and which is that the law speaks to our history and to the future of our nation. Are you lacerated enough? Is the wound satisfyingly deep? This law speaks to our history and to the future of the nation. No, this law brushes our history and destroys our future. Oil the cat or line, okay? Oil the cat o' nine tails of your whips. You run them lovingly through the hollow of your palm. Prepare your sign back for another assault. For the Supreme Court was not done yet. It then gloats and goes on to underline what the Home Minister said while tabling this barbaric act. The purpose of enacting the law was explained by the Union Ministers of the Home Affairs on the floor of the Lok Sabha on 10th September 1991. We see this bill as a measure to provide and develop our glorious traditions of love, peace, and harmony. These traditions are part of a cultural heritage of what every Indian is justifiably proud. Tolerance of all the faiths has characterized our civilization since time immemorial. Okay? Never forget that these politicians and these judges enacted this draconian act to preserve the characteristics of our civilization. They spoke and acted as though they not us understand what a civilization is, and because they are the keepers of its characteristic, they must act for it us, and no matter how unjust or undemocratic this consequence of their action might be. So I ask, what is civilization? How do you define it? Is it an idea to be thrust upon subject so that they can carry it forward? Is it placements of work on the left and spoons on the right of resplendent crockery? Is it sartorial splendor? Is it wonder? Is it words uttered or written? Is it science? Is it ease of living, or is it consumption, or is it money? Many of the worst tyrant who killed millions, wiped off entire races, even continents, have been poets, artists, proponents of a science. But would you call their endowments as a promoting or harboring a civilizations? To me, the mark of a civilization is this unquenchable thirst of a man to demand justice for his ancestors, to correct a historical wrong, but that exemplifies a continuity and idea, a memory that can never be erased, that is worth fighting for and preserving. It makes justice greater than the sum of its past and parts, and that is why civilization are not fleeting like the empires. To demand justice for a people who are dead for hundreds of years, it is almost as though you can feel their pains and their suffering and their destruction that has transcended the limits of the body and time. And that is why history is a medicine, why catharsis is a cure. And when I see the Ram Janambhoomi being reclaimed, I see it as a catharsis, as a deliverance of a justice from ancestors who were wronged. I do not know what shape the temple would take. I do not know when it would ultimately come up. In a way, being an atheist, these issues are not of a proper importance to me, but I know for a fact that that the deliverance has come. It is confounding to me because I'm but a bunch of cells here today, gone tomorrow, but still till the time I'm alive, this concept of striving to correct the historical justice is vital. It defines who I am, as if what civilization I am part of. That erasing my gene cannot erase my civilizations. The concept of justice is like the memory, it keeps getting passed on until realized. And to those who now call this nation a Hindu Rashtra run by the religious zealot and fascist, and to those I speak, in which theocratic states would with religious zealots to wait for a half a millennium, and even that 1 billion people strong, leave it to 10, leave it to 5 people to decide the fate of the demands. The yearnings to the consagrations of their soul itself. This is what makes me proud, that India, through the delivery and acceptance of the Ayodhya judgment, has written her history with the grammar of justice, not anarchy. This movement throws up a milieu of a connected philosophical conundrums. To one of the beings, should a judge be the product of the society, or should a society be the product of a judge? Okay, that is a very important question, right? Should a judge be the product of the society, or should the society be the product of a judge?
Should judge be this product of the society? Yeah, if the judge is the product of the society, then okay. Uh, should a judge be the product of the society, or should a society be the product of a judge? As I said, 5 judges took the call. The alternative was for 1 billion Hindus to take it. Academy prevailed over anarchy, and I'm proud that it did. On the Babri Masjid Ram Janambhumi issues, one must read the Supreme Court and Allahabad High Court judgment to really understand why quack leftist historians spread so many lies that the court had to step in to blast them for their perfidy and mediocrity. They said that 50 excavated temples pillars were placed there. So they said the Vishnu Hari inscription was stolen from the Lucknow museums and brought there. They said that there was a Buddhist shrine there. There was a Jain shrine there. There was a mosque there, but there was no Hindu temple underneath the dome. Ultimately, all their lies came to nothing as the judge rejected all their claims and accepted that there indeed was a Hindu temple underneath the dome and that the dome did not have its foundation but was raised on existing walls. This is what the court had said about one professor, Suvira Jaiswal. She claimed that the disputed building was constructed in the 6th century by Babur at Ayodhya called Babri Mosque, and the statement she is making as a historian. But simultaneously on page 105, she said that she has not read anything about Babri Mosque and did not study thoroughly and therefore cannot say as to when Babri Mosque came into existence. Historians, after quite this story, and was exposed. There is R.C. Thakran in newspapers. I've read Babur had built a mosque in Ayodhya. As a historian, I consider newspaper to be a source of knowledge. I myself never did any excavation in any field. Here's the quote from the expert, okay, Professor Sushil Srivatsa. Though the witness has been produced as an expert historian, but on page 222, he admits that he had very little knowledge of history. There's no other way of putting it. The only bulwarks for the justice of science and evidence. I take you back to the story of a Turin shroud that for 2000 years was believed to have been used for wrapping the body of a Jesus after crucifixion, until in 1989, when scientists proved through carbon dating that it was only 600 years old. Science teaches us to not fear our past. Law teaches us those nations that fear the past, fear the futures. The Places of Worship Act teaches us not only to fear our past, but also to fear our future. That's why I say in the matter of Ayodhya or Kashi or Mathura, the Hindus must be thanked for pleading before court to seek justice. If the holiest shrine of some other religion was demolished and the people of the other faith washed their dirty feet all around this sacred relic, this country would have witnessed a civil war. The atheist who was a debt of, great debt of gratitude to the billion Hindu who are writing their history as the grammars of justice, not anarchy, especially because it is beyond any doubt that Aurangzeb ordered the demolition of the Kashi Vishwanath temples and ordered the Kanvapi mosque be built over it. Only those who have read the history from the WhatsApp University believe otherwise. It is written in the most authentic biography of Aurangzeb, Masjid-e-Alamgiri, that in 1669, on orders of Aurangzeb, the Kashi Vishwanath temple was demolished, and then 1 year later he ordered the demolition of the temples at Madurai and had the idols brought to Agra to be scattered under the sweeps of the Begum Sahib's monastery, so they would be rot announced. The Farman is also archived in Bikaner archives, and here is a Sir Judanaj Sharka translations of Masir-e-Alamgiri. Aurangzeb, eager to establish Islam, issued orders to the governors of all the provinces to demolish the school and temples of the infidels, and the utmost urgency put down the teachings and the public practices of the religion of these misbelievers. And yet, there are those who deny the Hindus their legitimate right to correct historical injustices and the principle among other are that among other legislatures and the judiciary through the 1991 Places of Acts, and that is also why I profoundly disagree with the RSS chief, Dr. Mohan Bhagwan, when he says, "Why look for shivling in every mosque?" I find his statement flippant, frivolous, and an insult to all those who seek to legally correct historical injustices. Why look for shivling in every mosque? You may, say that as a Darwinian atheist, I have no legitimate right to intervene, but I assert that this is not a Hindu issue or religious issue. So, looking at after a shivling, 1 shivling or 10 shivling or 10,000, reclaiming demolished, destroyed places of worship, correcting the historical injustices is an Indian issue. It is a civilizational issue. To the historian Sri Sitaraman Goel meticulously tabulated 1862 mosques that are built upon the demolished temples. According to J.S.I. Deepak and Vikram Sampath, this number is as high as 40,000, and that is why we need to look for each and every shivling, wherever it is, hidden or exposed. Undergrounds or overheads, we owe it to our ancestors. We owe it to the justice itself because, as I said,
The concept of justice is like the memory; it keeps getting passed on. Commitment and him and his lords abort. His legs buckled, his eyes wet, carved in stone. His legs buckled and his eyes wet, carved in stone, but heart beset. He sat outside with the perked up ears, waiting patiently for 400 years. He saw the monster in his hot dresses charge his lord with the rusted swords. He saw them wash, he saw them spit in those waters of the pit. He heard their cries, he heard their cries, okay, he heard their calls, but he lived through it. He saw it all, but a whisper, not a groan. Life he knew was not in loan, and when his moment of joy came, he then claimed. Then his moment of joy to claim, and he saw them claim it was just a fountain.